across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. Happy Scorchio Friday to you. It is lovely and balmy out there. I'm loving this weather. You know, don't you say it quietly. Please don't go, son. Please stay. Please stay. All these people rambling on, moaning about air conditioning and heat on tubes and, wouldn't it be nice if just the weather broke? No, shut up. This is brilliant. Don't scare it off. But if you did want to scare something off, perhaps you might want to scare off our unelected Prime Minister, or is elected, I suppose, anointed Prime Minister to be in 17 days' time, Andy Burnham, but could be getting the keys to number 10 Downing Street. And, you know, there are times, sometimes, right, in this country, I just think, what is wrong with us as a country? What is wrong with us that we just sit there and we take this stuff? We just go, well, that's normal. Oh, well, you know, 10th Prime Minister in 7 years or 7th in 10 years, whatever it is. That's all right. That's what we do now. You know, a man who 1 minute ago was Greater Manchester Mayor decides, don't want to do that anymore. I'm just going to run Britain instead. And so forces his mate to stand down. 20,000 people voted for him. That's how many ballots were cast for Andy Burnham, or Andy, as he's now called. Just Andy. Simple old Andy. And he basically ran a campaign on just signs with an emoji on it. Andy for us. Andy for Manchester. So 20,000 people voted for him because they don't like Starmer, and now 70 million people are going to get some sort of mad leftist Prime Minister who's going to do Lord knows what. He's been talking about 10-year terms or something, a 10-year mandate, 10-year plan. Excuse me? You didn't even get voted in to be Prime Minister first time round. You're just going to, like, get rid of elections next? Oh, that's right, yeah, going to make appointments to Cabinet of people who aren't elected. So goes the rumour mill. We've just gone full-blown Chinese Communist Party, ladies and gentlemen. And don't let anyone fool you. This sort of clown version of cartoon communism that we've got lying in wait for us is not a laughing matter. It's going to be pretty drastic. He has talked about, well, I'm going to stick with the Labour Party manifesto. I think you ought, my friend. I think that is basically protocol for, I don't know, a democratic nation that a political party gets elected in and gets given a mandate based upon its policy programme. You can't just, you know, say, oh, I'm just going to move number 10 Downing Street up to Manchester now. This is madness, people. This is craziness, folks. How much is it going to cost us to have an unaccountable, anointed Prime Minister miles away from the capital city where the lobbyists are, who, you know, the big business who wants to make conversations and talk about investment in Britain. All of the parliamentarians who, you know, sit and do their work in a building just downriver from here. What about all of the parliamentary aides? What about the cabinet secretaries in Whitehall? No, you just have a bunker up there in Manchester, why don't you? At this point, he may as well build a volcanic lair and have a white cat to stroke. You know, but we were like, isn't it nice, Andy? Manchester doesn't even mean anything. Hollow, stupid, cartoonist, facile, infantile, puerile words while we're essentially witnessing some sort of communist coup. And we're just sitting here going, well, you know, it's Britain, innit? It's what we do now. We don't complain. We don't take to the streets and, you know, cause havoc like the French. Oh, no, no car tyres are light here in London. We'll just let it happen. He seems like a nice guy. Plus, he's got a cracking pair of eyelashes. I mean, I don't understand why we have become so servile to this game-playing nonsense. The coups, the parlour games, the musical chairs in number 10, the political plotting, the ousting, the factions, the unelected appointments, the radical programme of, oh, look, guess what? I've read that manifesto, and do you know what? I think we probably can raise taxes, although it explicitly makes a promise not to. But don't worry, Andy will be coming after your houses, your businesses, your inheritance, your savings, because the backbenchers, of course, are saying, well, you can't touch welfare. That wouldn't be very Labour, would it? Do we honestly think that an electing an emoji into number 10, the people of Makerfield, that all of a sudden the rest of the political party who want all this radical leftism is just going to dissolve and disappear, and Andy Burnham, like some magic unicorn from the world of politics, is going to wave a magic wand and cure Britain of all of its ailments? Is he some sort of messiah? I don't think so. But there you are. That's where we are. And, well, keeps people like me entertained. Although what happens next is anybody's guess. Meanwhile, blimmin' Britain. Real things affecting us. Headline after headline. And we heard nothing, have we? About Burnhamism, Manchesterism, about immigration. What's that going to look like? About law and order, about deporting violent, sick, twisted, psychopathic criminals like the head of the grooming gang in Rochdale, who has been released from prison and for whatever reason, because of some Commonwealth Act of 1971, we can't send him back from whence he came, so he's in some sort of bail house back in Rochdale, where his victims were. This man is a bona fide monster. He should not be in this country, living with funding from us, the taxpayers. And what's Burnham going to do about that? Oh, what did Burnham do as a Greater Manchester mayor and sort of nominally the head of police and law enforcement up in that neck of the woods of Greater Manchester? What did he do about the grooming gangs and investigating them? Oh, that's right, kind of help cover it up. People, come on, we must do better than this. Right. Let's speak now to the brilliant Roy Ram, former commander of specialist operations at New Scotland Yard. Roy, talk to me about the fact that we're not able to deport this disgusting, violent gang leader, a ringleader, Shabir Ahmed, who's now 73 years old. He was sentenced to more than 20 years in jail after being convicted of 30 child rape offences. Of course, that's the convictions, not necessarily all that he did. Yeah. He served just 14 years. Out he comes and is going to be going back in a bail hostel or whatever it may be, but back where he committed his offences.
Yeah, just imagine the feeling of the victims of his horrendous crimes and their families. Those young children who have grown up and their families have had to support them, knowing that this man is coming back to their community. It is truly horrendous. And I think it highlights, his particular case, highlights the difficulties that we've got with the asylum system, as well as the ability to deport criminals who are allegedly here legally. You know, the public, the level of disquiet, I think, within the public and indeed in the police service about the lack of ability to get rid of these people is truly troubling. And you know, I've read the paper the last couple of days saying that the government is going to rush through some legislation to try to get rid of these people more quickly. It really has to happen, because I understand the level of disquiet that is growing. Seeing this, I saw one on the BBC last night where they've tracked this guy who was made literally millions of pounds about bringing illegal immigrants into the UK, and is now himself here back in the UK seeking asylum. There has to be a mechanism that reassures the public that British law and order is meaningful and protects them. And right now, I don't think it does.
I don't think it does at all. I mean, we also have problems sort of downstream of all of this, or perhaps it's upstream, when it comes to tackling serious and organised crime, such as the grooming gangs. I was listening to the radio this morning about reports of men on the dark web organising the drugging and rape, mass rape of women, and sharing information about that. And the grooming gang scandal went on for decades and decades. And we know, even though we haven't had any sort of statutory inquiry, we know that there were people in positions of authority who must have been complicit, at the very least, by turning a blind eye or being too afraid to challenge some of the things taking place. As someone who's a commander of specialist operations at New Scotland Yard, how endemic is a problem like this to Great Britain, where we're actually tackling industrial-scale sexual offences?
Alex, I think there's a real problem of tackling both sexual offences and other offences which are, if you like, contained within minority groups. British policing has struggled in the past with racism, no doubt about that. But the pendulum has swung the other way now, and I think that there is a marked reluctance over many years now to really get into some of these groups because of the fear of being accused of racism. You know, we saw that I think we saw that in the terrible murder of Henry Novak just a few weeks ago, where the conduct of police officers seems to have been impacted by their fear of confronting somebody with a different racial origin. You look at some of the crime that's going on in the Kurdish Turkish community, excuse me, and you know, it's quite clear that some of the vape shops on our high streets are fronts for serious crime. They are fronts for money laundering. There's been instances of where there have been fronts for grooming, and all of these things have been, you know, police forces have been reluctant to challenge them, and that has to change.
Yeah, I always wonder when you see these things hiding in plain sight, when you see the vape shops, the barber shops, the nail bars, the phone repair shops that have sprung up everywhere on every high street in every town, almost to every last village in the United Kingdom. And like you said, many of them, a great number of them, are being used as fronts for organised crime, laundering and washing money. At the same time, we've still got streams of people coming in from abroad. We're now seeing videos circulating online of young men shouting things like this is going to be the end of England, coming over about waving a machete, and yet we're putting people into HMOs. I see a situation burgeoning now with a number of people who have come over expressly to take part in organised crime, or at the very least they have paid members of organised crime cartels for their passage or indebted to them. Problems like this are just going to explode, aren't they? Because if you're organising, whether it be a terrorist clique, a crime cartel, and you want to get people into the country, want to get weapons into the country, want to get operatives, want to have people to work in the black market, illegal immigration is the way to do that.
Yeah, and I think what's happening is that they're kind of building, in many of these groups, a sort of an infrastructure that does facilitate more serious crime, does facilitate, you know, the more serious criminals coming into the UK. And if we're not tackling that at the grassroots on the high street, I mean, when you look at things like counterfeiting tobacco that's appeared in so many of these little local vape shops and like, that is a multi-million-pound business which is feeding organised crime. And you know, poor old trading standards officers have been virtually powerless to do what they need to do to stop it. And it's these kinds of issues which are growing and changing the face of our high street. People are noticing it.
Why are people powerless to act on this? Is it just that the police are going after low-hanging fruit, simple targets? I mean, now, thankfully, non-crime hate incidents will soon become a thing of the past. But why is it when, you know, it's very obvious to me, I could walk down any high street in London and point out all the shops that probably should be raided, and I'm just a layperson. Using my own eyes, I can look at the staff in those shops, look at the sort of things they're selling and the services they offer, and probably draw pretty accurate assumptions, and yet they operate for years and years and years. It should be an easy fix, surely. It should be, you know, raid the shop, arrest the person, close it down. Why are these things not being acted on?
Yeah, I think there are a number of issues that need to be tackled, and they have been. I think in Manchester, great credit to the Chief Constable of Manchester, where they got the police and trading standards worked together, and they changed the face of an entire area. And I think that the police forces need to work more closely with other agencies, particularly like trading standards, who have got additional and distinct powers. Sometimes, you know, you look at what the police are empowered to do with certain laws, and they haven't got the ability, they haven't got the police powers, but other agencies have. And there needs to be a much more coordinated approach to dealing with these street level issues.
Talking about streets, let's talk about vigilantes taking to the streets. We were speaking earlier about Shabir Ahmed, who is being released from prison, the head of the grooming gang's cycle in Rochdale, is being sent back to that area. And as a result, a chap called Billy Howarth has organised people patrolling the area, saying that the victims deserve greater protection. What do you make of this? It seems to me that when you have a dissolution of law and order in society, you do end up with vigilantism, but it doesn't really help matters, does it?
No, it doesn't. And it will end up with the police being distracted in policing the vigilantes. I mean, whoever made the decision that it was a good idea to have this man not just released from prison, but come back to the community that he has abused, frankly, needs the sack. If he's come to the end of his prison sentence and if there is no immediate mechanism to get him out of the country, the last place that he should be is the place where he committed his offences.
I totally agree. Now let's talk about further downstream of the justice system, and this is where people are getting sentenced. And as somebody who has worked in specialist operations, you definitely know how hard it is to gather all the right evidence, get something past Crown prosecution thresholds, and then see a conviction secured in the courts of law. So when you have a situation like this, which was the horrific rape of two girls at the hands of boys who were aged 13 and 14 at the time. And they had 11 rape convictions between them over several attacks in Fordingbridge in Hampshire during the course of 2024 and last year. And then there's another boy who was convicted for encouraging attacks. That ends up in a situation where it can be tried in court, and the judge turns around and says, well, these young men, because the community they're from, because of the way they've been brought up, it's not their fault. Look at how nicely they've behaved in court, wearing their suits and complying and, looking the part and doing as their lawyers have instructed them. There you go. Don't you worry. Do better next time. Whereas the girls who have suffered what was a horrific attack at the hands of these disgusting feral boys are going to be marked by the scars of that offence for their entire lifetimes. I mean, it's a good thing that this has been overturned for being unduly lenient. But what must it feel like for everybody involved in steering that particular offence towards a charge, towards a successful prosecution, to then have some sort of liberal leftist lawyer with a wig on turn around and go, oh, well, I'm going to take the side of the offenders?
Yeah, you know, I can just imagine being the police officer in charge of that investigation and having victim support officers encouraging those young girls to report these offences. That in itself is immensely traumatic. To counsel them and to eventually get them to give their evidence and present it to the court, only at the conclusion of the trial to see these young men walk free. It must have been absolutely awful. And fortunately, the Court of Appeal realised that this was an absolute travesty of justice. But, when you start to look at the age of criminal responsibility now, and you see so many crimes being really serious crimes being committed by young people aged well below the age of criminal responsibility, the 15s, the 14s, the 15, 16-year-olds, they are behaving like adults. And I think we need to look again at what the sentencing regime across a whole range of offences is. Yeah, sure, you don't want to over-criminalise people, but where you're seeing, as you described them, feral youngsters repeatedly committing really serious crimes and getting away with it, what's the message they're also sending to their peer group? We can do anything we like here. All we have to say is we're beneath the age of criminal responsibility, or we're juveniles and need to be treated differently. And it sends an appalling message to the victims of crime. It sends an appalling message to the peers of their age group that the law is really ineffective in that regard.
It is, and we're not looking at the causes of crime anymore either. I think that, we've not done enough to tackle young people watching pornography, for example, getting strange ideas of how they should interact with one another. We're in a mess, boy. We are in a big mess, but let's see what our newly anointed Prime Minister might say about this when he gets the keys to number 10 in 70 days' time. Roy Rand, thank you ever so much, former Commander of Specialist Operations at New Scotland Yard. Ashford Hastings' message saying, hi, Alex, Shabir Ahmed was serving a 22-year-old sentence, but he also received another 19 years in the same trial that ran concurrently. So the total sentence was actually 41 years. And he was out after just 14. I think that's an important point to make, says Ash. Joanna says, we can deport the Rochdale gang leader. They've had 14 years to sort it out. That's not to mention all the others that have come out and are due out with deportation orders on their sentencing. That's true. This idea that all of a sudden we're scrambling to figure out why we have to keep this man in the country when he's been inside for 14 years, has nobody picked this matter up? Has nobody looked at how we can make sure that he is packed off and sent back to Pakistan? Not forgetting that the leader of the paedophile ring will probably be welcomed back by his comrades in child sex offences, so he'll be well looked after, someone's messaged. Well, that's the thing. These crimes were endemic within society. There will be people who did horrific, disgusting, bestial things with Shabir Ahmed who didn't end up being prosecuted. He'll have his support network from his insular, closed-off, let's help one another out community. What about the victims? What about them and the impact on their families? We're going to be taking a short break now. When we come back, are you going to stay up to the wee small hours on Sunday to watch, well, Monday morning actually, to watch England's next World Cup clash? Well, apparently emergency legislation is being passed to ensure that pubs can stay open as late as 5 o'clock in the morning. Should kids be having a day off school? Should people have a day off work? I mean, come on, where's the fortitude? Although, good for business, no doubt, for hospitality, which, without question, have struggled lately. We're going to be catching up with a pub landlord on just that after this.
Let's get to the calls now. And Kevin is in Basingstoke. Morning, Kevin. Kevin, what do you think of this cycling conversation?
Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to...
Disagree with me.
Yeah. I mean, there's far more accidents caused by cars than bikes.
Yeah, we're not talking about cars, Kevin. We're talking about bikes.
I'm never talking about bikes, but if we encourage more bikes, then there'll be less accidents. More people...
more people on bikes who are not being controlled by anything.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Let's now talk about the economy. or what will become of it, what is left of it, that is. Because it seems to me, as I was ranting about early on in the programme, we were about to have an anointed, rather radical Prime Minister who wants to bring about a whole load of sweeping, very left-wing changes to the way that the country is managed. He wants to see an increasing devolution, possibly tax-raising powers to entities such as metro mayors, more responsibilities through devolution, which, of course, costs a lot of money. More pen pushers, more pen pushers' pensions, more pen pushers' apparatchiks. Not only that, he seems to want to nationalise utilities, the price tag of which is utterly mind-boggling. How is he going to fund all of this when there is at least a £5 billion shortfall in defence? Some say it's as big as £15 billion just to be able to essentially defend our realm. Also, pay the pensions of our veterans. What about the backlogs in the NHS and boosting funding into social care? What about a huge period of house building, council house construction, which he has promised? What about everything that he says he wants to do without raising taxes, because he says he will stick with the Labour Party manifesto and not increase taxes? Caveat: on working people. Do you remember that? We've all got to figure out what a working person is again. So where is the money going to come from? Well, he's suggested there could be measures such as increasing business rates on out-of-town warehouses and funneling that money into cutting them for high streets and hospitality. There's been suggestions he could bring capital gains in line with income tax. There's also been a suggestion that the way council tax is levied, or indeed extra taxation on high-value properties or high-value land, could come into effect. All of this without a single national ballot being cast. Where will that leave us? Will he cut the welfare bill? And if not, are we toast? Let's speak now to the brilliant Justin Urquhart-Stewart, economist and chairman of the Regionally Investment Platform. Justin, where do we begin with Burnhamism? What is it? I suppose we don't know. There's not going to be a leadership contest, so no one's really going to see anybody, one assumes, outlining what their programme for governance would be. But everything we're getting leaked right now does seem like a radical veer to the left wing. Can we afford it?
Yeah, we can't afford very much at the moment. What we need is some leadership and to try and actually give the economy some confidence. Because if you don't have confidence, and I know I've bored you with this before, then you and I don't go out and have a meal, mind you, by all means delighted to, but we don't go out so often. We don't actually maybe invest so much. We don't start up new businesses because I don't have the confidence to risk my investment money going into those things. So what we actually need to do is not at the moment, don't believe anything that's being said right now, because as you said, he hasn't been elected. There aren't a string of logical policies there. So this is a series of odd titles being strung together just to get some headlines. But there are things he can be doing to actually try and make sure life gets a little bit more sanity to it. The first thing they'd reach for, of course, is the magical money tree. And actually, the money tree did exist, but it's looking a bit like a withered stick at the moment. It's called quantitative easing, which you go back 30 years ago, no one had a clue what it was and certainly couldn't spell it. But of course, it was a means by which the government could increase the amount of money it's got by issuing more debt through the Bank of England, and therefore it's not seen as being central. Of course, it's increasing our debt. But the rather strange thing about it is, as a result of all of this, all our government debt, which is high, 20% of it is actually owned by us. The government actually owns its own debt. So in theory, you could actually cross both sides of the balance sheet off because you've got assets and liabilities. But you wouldn't do that because you'd scare the markets. But what it means, though, quite logically, is that you don't have to stick to that rule which sort of says, this is our debt and we're actually sunk at, because part of that debt is also an asset. Now, by doing some of that, at very short notice, you'd actually create a little bit more confidence in saying, actually, we're not actually penniless, we're not operating very well, but it's not quite as disastrous as the headlines would have us make.
Let's talk about this sort of... one thing that we do understand about Burnhamism is there's a clear ambition to regionalise and bureaucratise the country. He's talking about greater devolution, he's talking about tax-raising powers going to metro mayors, for example. Now, when I was looking at the parts of the United Kingdom that have devolution in some format, namely Wales, Scotland, etc. In Wales, 1 in 4 jobs are now government jobs, essentially. It's not a growth-generating element because it's just taking money from the taxpayer to sustain itself. As a result, both Scotland and Wales see deficit shortfalls to the sum of around 25 billion each, because they spend a lot more than they're making. And I want to get your opinion on this because you are chairman of Regionally Investment Platform, looking at how things can be done on a sort of more case-by-case regional devolved level. But what about when that merges with bureaucracy? What about when we're creating more staff, more, sort of extra elements of the civil service all around the country? Can it help growth, or does it have a chokehold effect?
Well, as you describe it now, the answer is no, it would actually cost more. However, there are some useful bits of actually devolving action to areas. For example, we know in parts of, say, Newcastle, some serious roads need rebuilding there, and you can wait till the sun doesn't rise anymore to actually get permission from the Treasury to build it. So we actually there is lots of local investment money available. There are local projects which could be developed straight away, short-term ones. And again, so seeing more money flowing through the system. Who would raise that money? Well, you could actually have, as we used to have, Mrs. Thatcher quite rightly got rid of them, local bonds from, say, Kingston upon Hull or something like that. Now, they're fine so long as you don't let these people get out of control, as we've seen in Scotland and we've seen in Wales, and they just end up printing all the money, and don't worry, central government will pick up the bill eventually. But actually what you can do is ensure there is more regional investment by that region and giving them the responsibility to do so. But it needs careful watching to make sure they don't go on a spending spree. So that's one way in which they can try and do it. I fear, however, what you're doing is actually, as you just quite rightly intimated, you're creating another level of government and extra cost. There was an interesting point. Go back to 1945, which I'm pleased to say I don't remember. We had 45 stock exchanges in this country. The idea of raising local money for local businesses. Now, most of them are a waste of time because you end up with some silly git in red braces telling you what to do. We ended up with 7 regional ones, and now actually we've got one stock exchange, which I have to say is absolutely useless because it's focused on London with all the costs that go with it, and really is not doing what it's supposed to be doing, raising money in the most cost-effective way for business. Now, that's not down to the government. This is actually areas of the city and investment operations which need reforming, some initiative, and to be able to come up with more ideas and not just repeating what's happened in the past. So ideas, therefore, focus on smaller businesses to give them access to capital. Doesn't cost the government anything because they can do that with guarantees of capital. So if they only get called upon when the business goes bust, and some will. But in the meantime, others will be more successful, employing more people and therefore paying more tax, more VAT, and the economy starts moving. Now, where's the first thing you start on this? So we can learn this from what happens in America several times. The primary asset for most people is their house. If the value of their house they think is going down, they're feeling a bit miserable. If, however, you're encouraging the housing market by, say, reforming stamp duty, which is another way of saying getting rid of it, actually you will improve tax take because when they move house, people spend the money on plumbers and decorators and all sorts of things. And again, that's more money flowing through the system, more money from the government, but no investment from the government. Get the private sector to be able to do that, and funnily enough, it actually does work. Now, whether our new Prime Minister, our unelected Prime Minister, understands any of that, well, for what he's saying so far, I think, probably he doesn't. Running Manchester, which is, okay, it's a big city, but it's a few billion in terms of a balance sheet. Britain is a few trillion. That's a totally different issue altogether. So well done for getting the buses working properly. Buses don't actually run the economy.
Oh, I know. I have a feeling Burnhamism will imagine the Laffer Curve as some Britpop band from the 90s.
Absolutely.
Justin, thank you ever so much. Always a pleasure to have you on the programme. What is Burnhamism? He wants to spend a lot of money, doesn't he? He really does. He doesn't want to cut welfare. At least the backbenchers don't want him to see him go anywhere near it. But he wants to nationalise things, for crying out loud. How on earth is it going to add up? Well, it probably won't. Right. OK, let's take a short break. I want your thoughts on everything we've been talking about thus far today and anything else you want to get off your chest. Well, within reason. This ain't Fraser Crane. 03444 991 1000 is the number to call. It's your normal network rate. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp 87222 if you want to send a text message. If you're going to be old school and you smuzz, then write the word talk before you write out the contents of your brain. We are on socials at talkTV, and I'm back just after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, hello. How are you doing? Got a nice cup of tea? Got a nice brew with you? I hope so. Right. Want to hear from some of you, so do give us a call. 0344499 1000 is your normal network rate. Let's kick off by speaking to Elliot, who's in Hertfordshire. Good morning, Elliot. How are you doing?
Yeah, well, I'm furious. I mean, I think I'm going to lose it. This revolting individual who we're letting out, he's actually done two things wrong. Apart from interfering with young women, which is pretty repugnant, we've let him in the country legally. So there's two crimes. He's sentenced for 40 years. I have asked legal people in my profession, why are we letting this individual and others, Alex, out if they haven't completed their term?
Yeah.
And you know what? I've also heard we're trying to get him back to Pakistan. They don't want him. Not surprised. And we talk about Burnham rushing through legislation. You might as well wait until hell freezes over. He won't do anything. None of the Labour Party will. They rushed through under Johnson legislation of COVID. You think they're going to do anything with this individual? You have to be joking. The fabric of this nation is completely broken by these revolting revolting people, repugnant individuals that we have let in. I have young children. My own daughter, she's not so young anymore. She's just under 30. She's been back to the States. She lives in the States. She's come back to the UK. She says she doesn't recognise it.
Yeah.
The whole environment here is completely broken. The reason why it's broken is because the people in power loathe this country. They loathe you, they loathe me, and they loathe our heritage and history. And this is just axiomatic of what's gone wrong. And nobody's prepared to do anything about it, Alex. And if you say anything like me, or you, or whomsoever, you'll be accused of being racist. I really don't want to walk down the street when there are people who are interfering with young girls or boys. I've never heard of anything so revolting all my life, and nobody's prepared to talk about it properly. The grooming gang discussion, it's been going on for years.
Well, the problem now is the grooming gang discussion has become some sort of race to outdo one another in the sphere of politics. There's a load of people trying to look tougher, more prepared to fight, you know, blankets, rhetoric, without coming up with actual solutions. It's being used as a political football, quite frankly, which I find utterly disgraceful. And we're not getting to the core of the issue. All the while, we still have open borders where men from these monstrously misogynistic cultures are coming into Britain. I honestly believe some of them with the express desire to come and take advantage of our way of life for their ill, twisted ends. And you're right. Here we are.
And I was just going to say, the core question, though, if we get away from all the rubbish that is spoken, the lies that are given by this government and the previous government, there's no leadership here. My question simply is, and I say I've spoken to legal people, why are we letting this horrible, evil individual out after 14 years when he has a 40-year sentence? We must be mad, Alex.
We are. Our whole justice system is broken down. It's broken down because it's been infiltrated by the woke mind virus. And it's been going on for decades. Not just this government, the previous government. For decades now, we've had this creep of a dissolution of law and order, of two-tier policing, of condoning the most sickening, awful offences at the altar of anti-racism. And it's got to stop. And yet, as you can see, the powers that be, the deep state, the establishment will do all they can to try and prevent those who actually want to grab the nettle, those who actually want to tackle this stuff head on. They will do everything to keep them from power. Elliot, thank you ever so much for your call, my darling. Let's speak to Georgina in London. Hello. Good morning, Georgina.
Good morning, Alex. You do fire me up in the morning, let me tell you. You really do. And I do agree with Elliot. You know, we must be mad. And I think that over the last 40 years, that the British have lost their fight. They've been worn down, Alex, by corruption, incompetence and lies of the sitting and prior governments. And to have an unelected, self-appointed Prime Minister walk into number 10 without a democratic vote or a mandate, in my opinion, beggars belief. Anyone who thinks Andy Burnham is the answer to the problems that we face today is going to be very disappointed.
Talking about two-tierism, here it is striking again, because everybody complained about the constant change of leadership in the Conservative Party. Everyone was saying this is anti-democratic. At least we actually saw leadership contests. At least we actually had television debates hosted between the runners and the riders, laying out what their policy programme would be, explaining how they prepared to govern the country. And then Conservative membership voted on it. Yes, of course, that doesn't represent much of a percentage of those who actually have access to the plebiscite, but it did sort of at least have a glimmer of democracy about it. With Burnham, you're talking about 0.03% of the voting population choosing this person to become the Prime Minister. That slither of democracy is so blimmin' small, you need the James Webb Telescope to find it. It's utterly crazy. And we're now hearing about 10-year plans. He's going to move number 10 up to Manchester. It's like a farce. If the right wing were doing that, can you imagine if the Conservative Party had decided to anoint automatically some leader who is further to the right than Liz Truss, who said, right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to completely deregulate everything. I'm going to rip up the withdrawal agreement with the EU. I'm going to get rid of the Human Rights Act. I'm going to leave the ECHR. I'm going to do all these radical right-wing things, but without it being elected, without it having been in the manifesto. And what's more, I'm going to do it from a bunkshire from deepest, darkest rural Oxfordshire. And I'm going to come up with a plan for the next 10 years. They would be crying blue murder on the legacy airwaves. Right. They would be screaming about how this is some sort of fascist overtaking of society, how this is anti-democratic, how it is a coup. And yet, because it's an emoji with eyelashes, we're like, Andy's lovely, isn't he so kind, isn't this progressive? Well, do you know what happens? You can map it out as a guarantee. The minute all of those crazy establishment elitist leftists jump on some sort of bandwagon, you can almost count it to the exact day that it falls apart. They loved Zach Polanski, didn't they? Platforming every which way until they all realised he was an absolute basket case, and now, you know, his vote shares dropped enormously. Every time they do this, every single time they wet themselves over the idea of some sort of leftist icon coming into power, having some sort of position of authority, and all of a sudden we suddenly see behind the curtain and the Wizard of Oz looks like a mad Marxist lunatic, and it all falls apart.
Right, Alex. I mean, you know, he's talking about moving number 10 to Manchester. Why don't we move the Bank of England to the Isle of Skye, for God's sake? There's no money in the Exchequer. We've got stagnated growth. We have a serious migrant crisis. We're having to buy steel from abroad because we're not allowed to drill in our North Sea. He's going to get us back into the EU, overturning our Brexit vote. As well as pushing for us to have digital ID. And with him as a Prime Minister, the welfare bill will continue to grow. So what on earth is there to look forward to? He didn't address any of these issues in his speech, Alex. In fact, his speech was hollow and superficial. And I am certain that this man will put every one of us in this country in a communist straitjacket. We'll be taxed to the hilt. What freedom of speech we have will be left. It will be taken. And this country will end up bankrupt. So this is what I think...
But Georgina, come on. Andyism is putting hope in everybody's hearts. Don't forget that. This is vibes politics now. Georgina, my darling, I've got to say goodbye to you because we are due an advert break. And while we still live in some remnants of a capitalist society, so here's some stuff you might want to buy. I'll see you on the other side.
crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We live in such a cartoon clown country, don't we? You know, when you want to look back at what Sir Keir Starmer's legacy is going to be, what is it? The only thing he seems to bang on about all the time is breakfast clubs in schools. I'll tell you what, sunshine, this is what you're going to be remembered for: locking people up for social media, cracking down on free speech, watching Britain burn by making all the wrong choices through your pathetic jingoistic politics. And here we go, another example. Emergency legislation being rushed through so pubs can stay open till 5 a.m. on Monday morning for the World Cup. Well, that's great. I'm all for that. I mean, you've done as much as you can to trammel the hospitality industry into the ground with record-high energy bills, sky-high business rates being put up, the tax on alcohol, increases of employers' national insurance, these crazy workers' rights, which means you can barely sack anybody. And so, basically, the backbone of the country has been absolutely smashed to pieces. But you say, oh, it's OK, because it's the World Cup, pubs can stay open. It is cartoon politics, and we're not falling for it. Because where emergency legislation is needed, when we look at the fact that you cannot deport the ringleader of a child rape gang in Rochdale, despite the fact of being born and brought up in Pakistan, where's the emergency legislation on that? Where was the emergency legislation to drill in the North Sea the minute our energy bills became utterly unsustainable? No, Sir Keir Starmer said, I can't do that. That's up to the Energy Secretary, and he won't let me. Pathetic and weak. And now, look, we're in a situation that all we have is this performance politics to try and act as a distraction. Look at the puppet over here. Pubs are going to stay open. Meanwhile, we find out we've got a budget deficit for defence that could reach as high as £15 billion. At least £5 billion is being underfunded. And we've got a welfare bill completely out of control. 1 million young people out of work, not in employment or education. Record levels of borrowing. We're learning, aren't we, that Russia might have a little product Poland to see how well NATO can defend itself, see how resilient it is. I think they're going to find out it's severely wanted because our priorities are totally in the wrong places. Where was the emergency legislation to deport these people? A man like that ringleader of the grooming gangs in Rochdale, who's done 14 years in prison, a 41-year sentence. Out he comes. You've had 14 years, whoever is in control. Whitehall, the Conservatives, the Labour Party. 14 years to figure out how you can pack this man's suitcases and get him on an aeroplane to the other side of the world, and nothing's been done. But when it comes to trying to cheer us all up, saying that we can have a pint or two into the early hours, well, that will do it. That will keep them quiet. That will distract them for long enough while we get on with destroying anything we've got left of this country. It is absolutely pathetic, like the staging of the interception of that one vessel in Russia's shadow fleet as it came through the channel. And we learned that Sir Keir Starmer said, well, we better get aboard that thing and make it look like we're doing something. My domestic situation situation's looking a little bit twitchy at the moment, and we learned that it was all done for the cameras because 700 odd other vessels are just steaming around our waters willy-nilly without us doing anything. It's just, I have absolutely had enough now with government after government thinking that they can hoodwink us into they're doing nice things for us. The Be Kind movement, the, oh, look, haven't we got the gayest parliament ever, says Sir Keir Starmer, waving his pathetic little rainbow flag. Put your flag down, get that lanyard off of your neck, get off from that one knee and start dealing with the major issues that this nation is facing. Unfettered immigration, men from misogynistic cultures, would-be terrorists gathering in cells up and down the country. Don't stick them into HMOs where they can build bomb vests or sell methamphetamine or kidnap girls from outside primary schools and drag them back to their hovels. How about actually building deportation centres? Where's the emergency legislation for that? I mean, it's just sickening. We are not running this country. We're running afraid of all of our problems, constantly. We live in the politics of focus groups and silly little viral videos. Andy Blimmin Burnham with his, oh, let's do a little rating system on AI posters and moving number 10 to the north. This is not a primary school exercise. This is not a wet lunch break where we all get out our crayons and decide what emoji should be on your next campaign. We've got to get serious. And do you know what? That's you and me as well. That's us. That's you listening at home. That's you watching this clip on whatever platform you're watching it on. We can't keep putting up with this nonsense. We can't keep sitting there going, well, it's Britain. It's going to be all right in the end. Because you have seen it in real time over the past 15 to 20 years. Our country is being driven over the edge of a cliff. And we're sitting back and we're taking it. We're taking it because the powers that be in the legacy media are saying, isn't Andy Burnham nice? Oh, Andy for us. It's so cartoonish and stupid and designed to make you soporific and servile while they just ride roughshod over our history, our heritage, our culture, our economy, the safety of our kids, safeguarding, you name it, everything is falling apart. And instead we get comic strip politics. We get coups and faction fighting and people who are more interested in making out like they're characters in the West Wing than actually sitting down and grappling with the very perilous issues that are facing this nation right now. And I think we as Brits, we've got to get real. Because if we keep allowing this to happen, if we keep allowing the Prime Minister to change at a whim because some random who once upon a time just wants to be mayor decides he's going to become our next Prime Minister and, you know, build a new lair up in Manchester to do it, and we just go, well, that's normal. That's what we do now. Oh, yeah, don't have to be elected to run this country anymore. Just employ your mate. That's fine. Oh, do you want to cancel elections? Because the Labour Party tried to do that, didn't they? Wake up and see what is going on. We're living in a real-time communist coup in this country where all of a sudden accountability doesn't matter anymore. Your vote doesn't matter. Not only does your voice not matter, it needs to be silenced. If you say anything in opposition to the dreadful things going on in your community, that's right, you could end up with a knock on the door. Worse still, you could end up with jail time. But if you're a violent gang rapist of little children, given 41 years, out you come after 14. Here's a house for you to live in, right back where you committed those most disgusting, sickening, heinous of offences. All we need is serious leadership. We just need someone to say, this is right, this is wrong, this is the priority, and the rest of this bump we can just ignore. All the ABCD lanyard stuff, chuck that into the bonfire of history. That's not getting us anywhere. That's not growing the economy. That's not building up law enforcement so we can make sure violent criminals are not on our streets and people face the full force of the law and have requisite punishments when they do dreadful, dastardly, devilish things. This is... We've just got to a stage where it's not sustainable. We're not safe as a nation. We're not safe against outside attacks. Our economy is not safe. Your savings aren't safe. The house you own isn't safe. Your daughter isn't safe. Because instead we're pettifogging about performance politics rather than policy programming, ways in which to lead us back into a period of history that we can say we're building for the future, to leave to the next generation. What are they going to get at this point? An unrecognisable country that's basically living in anarchy, the good folk are being punished, the bad folk are running riot, and our aggressors overseas will be looking at us, knowing they're winning the grey zone warfare, attacking us from the inside. Well, from the outside, they're just counting down the days so they can come and do something to us, because we've got absolutely no way of protecting ourselves. And again, the cycle repeats. The legacy media clap the lefties, the righties get persecuted, the lawfare, the gossip, the plots, the malign ostracisation of anybody who wants to see this country return to some semblance of common sense, because common sense has become deeply unfashionable, hasn't it? The cycle will keep repeating until we wake up and decide that enough is enough. Oh, right. Going to take a short break now. Definitely need a cup of tea. Don't know about you. When we come back, we're going to be joined by the brilliant Paul Embry to talk about everything going on in the politics of the day, and there's plenty to talk about indeed. In the meantime, if you want to get in touch with the show, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Normal network rate 87222 on the text. Like talk before you write your message. I am back just after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Happy Friday. Good morning to you. How does it feel waking up in clown communist Britain? Woohoo! Isn't it wonderful? The sun is shining down upon our new left-wing dystopia. At least that is probably what it's set to become in about 17 days' time, when it seems that completely unopposed, Andy Burnham's just going to, I don't know, get off the conveyor belt inside number 10 Downing Street and then seek to move it all the way up to Manchester. You just couldn't even make this stuff up anymore. It's beyond farcical. We've become so desensitised to it. It's just like, Andy Burnham's plans are this. He's going to do this about tax. I'm sorry, you what? Who? Yeah, when did you decide you're running the country? Exactly. Nobody. Anyway, what is democracy? What does it matter anyway? The Conservatives, you know, put paid to all of that with the Brexit fiasco and their own musical chairs of leaders. We may as well just give up at this point because it's ineffective anyway. No one listens to what we have to say. When they do, they chuck us in prison for it. Let's speak to Paul Embry, trade unionist and author of Despised: Why the Modern Left Loathes the Working Class. Oh, where do we begin with all of this, Paul? First of all, let's talk about the top story of the day, which is number 10 is urging there needs to be a change in the law to kick out the Rochdale rapist. Well, that's great. You know, it's all very well saying there needs to be a change in the law. They're passing emergency legislation to keep pubs open. I don't see much urgency in making sure this man can be booted out back to Pakistan. They've had 14 years to figure this out.
Good morning, Alex. I'm going to take a bit of a dissenting view on this, actually, and I know you welcome dissenting views.
Always.
Look, I mean, first of all, let me stress that this man is a complete scumbag, and if I'd had my way, I would have seen him jailed for a lot longer than he actually was. But I have an instinctive aversion to the idea that governments, in the form of a particular Home Secretary at a particular time, should have what seems to me to be an extraordinary power to strip British citizens of their citizenship. Now, let me say that whether or not this man should have been granted citizenship in the first place is a different debate. Maybe he shouldn't have been, but that ship has sailed. The fact is he was. And my real concern over it is that governments with that kind of power can easily misuse it. It's a very, very strong disciplinary tool, isn't it, to say to the population, or at least those members of the population who are dual nationals, look, if you misbehave, if you do something, and I'm not talking about the extremes here of running a grooming gang, but it could be another type of crime that's committed, we are going to strip your citizenship. To me, it seems that citizenship is something you have or you don't. Either you're a British citizen or you're not. And I really don't like the idea of governments having the power to say, you are no longer a citizen of this country, get on with it. So as much as I loathe this man and everything that is done, and I think he should still be in jail, I start from the principle that British governments should not have that power.
Yeah, it's not actually quite clear. I mean, it's being suggested that he was a dual national, but he revoked his Pakistani citizenship. So it isn't entirely clear what his status is, but it's against all international treaties to make somebody stateless effectively anyway. But Pakistan have been quite clear. They say that they've maintained he is not a Pakistani national, so they don't want him inside the country, that he's considered a serious safeguarding risk because of his criminal past in the UK, and rightfully say, how can someone with his criminality be deemed safe in a country like Pakistan? He poses as much danger to children in Pakistan as he would anywhere else. I mean, this is the problem, but why he's let out of prison after just 14 years is a madness. Let's talk about the vigilantes taking to the streets over all of this, because you can understand why the local people in Rochdale think that it's utterly egregious that this man is back in their town.
Yeah, of course. You know, what he did was to commit one of the most heinous crimes that can be committed. I mean, the sexual abuse of children is an appalling thing, and it doesn't come any worse than that, really. And if you were a local resident, then I think entirely understandably you would have deep concerns about this man, you know, being around in your community again. And I think really, Alex, that the strength of feeling in places like Rochdale and elsewhere at the moment, and their reaction to this is entirely understandable given the whole grooming gang scandal and the fact that this was something that the authorities turned a blind eye to, whether it was the police, whether it was council leaders. And what it's done is it's created a massive lack of faith in national and local institutions and bodies and authorities such as that, to the degree where people feel it's almost now like they cannot rely on those authorities to defend them and defend their communities, and that they actually need to take to the streets in order to do it themselves. And you know, while obviously we wouldn't condone vigilantism, and you know, people should steer clear of breaking the law and committing violence, because these communities and the young girls, and let's be blunt, young white girls in those communities have been systematically let down by the authorities that should have protected them. it's not surprising, is it, that local people feel, well, if they can't do it, we're going to have to do it ourselves.
Let's talk now about Burnhamism. I mean, I just think, you know, whether one loves it or doesn't love it, I think it's utterly ridiculous that it's happening without people like you and I getting any sort of say on it. Because we're getting a lot of speculation, things being flown up the flagpole as to what he might do. Brilliant, he's actually going to become Prime Minister in about 17 days. There's not any sort of, you know, recourse to the British people about his plans, but there you have it. Let's talk about the sort of things he might want to do anyway. He said he'll stick to the central pledge in Labour's manifesto, which is not to increase the main rates of income tax, VAT or national insurance. But we know there's a huge deficit, a budget shortfall for defence. We know that our borrowing costs are through the roof. We know that the backbenchers are not going to let him make radical changes to the welfare bill. So what is he going to do? Where is he going to get the money from? Our understanding is this is a man who has argued a lot that work is overtaxed and assets are undertaxed, so he may well go after things like capital gains tax. And there's also talk of overhauling the council tax system and replacing it with a land value tax. Do you think that this is the right direction of travel? And do you also think that it's appropriate for him to be changing course in a pretty radical way without there being any sort of recourse to the public?
Well, on the economy, he's said that he wants to deliver growth while sticking to Rachel Reeves's fiscal rules. I think that shows a serious misunderstanding. I think what he doesn't realise is that it's those fiscal rules that are actually inhibiting growth at the moment. You may as well say you want to grow a lush new lawn while issuing a drought order. I mean, ultimately, you know, you cannot tax your way to growth. That's certainly true when the economy is flatlining, but neither can you cut your way to growth. The only way we're going to get growth, as far as I'm concerned, is by investment, and by investment, you create activity within the economy, you stimulate activity within the economy, and you boost, you know, growth, and you boost jobs, and you boost productivity, so on, and then you increase your tax revenue. So if your focus is on the deficit, actually the way to get it down is by increasing the tax revenues, by spending and investing in the first place. On the wider point about whether or not he's sticking to the manifesto, my position is this. Look, we live in a parliamentary democracy. That means we don't elect directly our leaders in terms of the Prime Minister. And of course, it's up to the largest party, the party that can command a majority, to pick the Prime Minister, however, whatever mechanism, whether they do it through the party grassroots or through MPs. But ultimately, you know, if you are going to depart radically, and it may be that he does intend to, from a manifesto on which you were elected, I think you have some sort of moral obligation, if not a constitutional one, to call a general election, because I think people can legitimately say out there in the country, well, this is what we voted for when we elected your government 2 years ago. And if you now are serving up something dramatically different to what was on offer then, you have an obligation to come back to us so that we can give you a fresh mandate if we choose to do so. So I think, and also from a tactical point of view, from Labour's point of view, that may actually be the only way they're likely to secure a second term, which is by going early.
No, I agree,
rather than leaving it for a couple of years. Oh,
I agree. I think if I was strategising on behalf of the party, I'd say, you know, generate a burn and bounce and run with it. But it's also, to use their favourite turn of phrase, the right thing to do. What do you make of this? Morgan McSweeney has come out from under his rock after being unceremoniously fired, and has said that the Labour Party failed to prepare for power, basically saying that during the general election, the party was so consumed by campaigning, it didn't actually sit down and say, what sort of world are we going to inherit and what do we need to do to govern it? And you think, what? They had 15 years while they were in opposition, where you shadow the minister, where you get to go to those meetings with the cabinet secretaries and see how departments are run. And, you know, they were planning to win the next general election and somehow they didn't know what they were going to do when they got there. I mean, is this not endemic in our politics now? And we can see it playing out in real time, that it's all about the campaigning, as if we're constantly on an election footing. It's all about polling and focus groups and coups and plots and headlines and viral tweets, and not about actually doing the basic job of nose to the grindstone. What do we need to do to address the big issues that we're facing?
Well, I think this was a really interesting interview, and actually a very interesting comment that you've touched on there. I think really, it's not so much that they didn't prepare for taking power. I think they did prepare for taking power. I think it's more the fact that they did not prepare or anticipate what might happen when they came up against the monolith of the British state apparatus and the civil service. Because look, whatever your politics, and I think you and I would probably agree on this, Alex, actually getting things done in this country has become almost impossible. And I don't think that the likes of McSweeney and Starmer really knew what was going to happen when the civil service and the British state essentially put a block in their way and said, you can't do this, you can't do that. And, your program that you've been elected on, it's going to be extremely difficult to get it through. And this is something, by the way, that the likes of Dominic Cummings, for example, have been talking about for years, the fact that we do have this kind of sclerotic state apparatus that makes it really difficult.
You talk about them not being prepared
that I think is where they failed.
Yeah, no, I agree. You're talking, but what's interesting here is you're talking about them not being ready to take on the sort of Gordian knot muscularity of the bureaucracy that is. I always describe it a bit like an unwashed pair of jeans. It just sort of keeps standing up by itself, even if there is no government to fill the leg holes. But what is interesting about that is when he first came into power in the King's Speech, Sir Keir Starmer announced a whole raft load of new quangos. He added to the pen pushers. He added to the behemoth of bureaucracy in this country quite deliberately. And a lot of that stuff, a lot of the meat, in the various offices up and down the country who, taking civil service salaries and wearing their lanyards, came as a result of Blairism. This massive increase in the state. Burnham wants to do the same. He wants to create more devolution, give more powers to metro mayors, which means even more pen pushers, even more apparatchiks. We've got over 20,000 elected officials in this country. 20,000. And actually, it seems in the Labour Party's DNA to just keep adding to it.
I have to say, I think it goes back even before Blair, Alex. I think, I'm a great aficionado of the Tony Benn diaries. And when he was the Secretary of State for Trade and Industry back in the 1970s, he wrote at length, and he spoke about it in the years afterwards, how, bearing in mind the Labour government that was elected in 1974 came to power on a pretty radical manifesto. He said the first meeting he had with his permanent secretary, Sir Anthony Part, at the Civil Service, Sir Anthony said to him, tell me, Minister, is it seriously your intention to implement your manifesto? And Tony Benn said he knew from that moment onwards that he was going to be having a daily battle with the civil service. And that's exactly how it turned out. He said that in the time that he was at the department, he got barely anything done, not because they didn't have the right ideas or the will, but they were blocked by the civil service. If I were running a political party now that was aspiring to be in government, I would be planning everything in terms of drafting legislation to make it clear that when we come to power, we are not going to be stopped by the apparatus of the state, the quangos, the civil service, and whatever we need to do in terms of filleting out the blockers, and there are plenty of them, that's what's going to happen. You need someone with that kind of radicalism and boldness to take them on.
We do indeed. We definitely need a sort of a skinny state at this point, but we just keep adding layer upon layer. It's a false economy as well. I mean, 1 in 4 jobs now in Wales are basically directly employed by government, which means we're paying for them rather than them generating money for the economy. I think we're in a doom loop. Paul, thank you ever so much. It's always a delight catching up with you, the fantastic Paul Embry. Right, let's read some of your messages, and after the break, it'd be great to take some calls as well. So let's do the messages, get our housekeeping sorted, then we can put the kettle on and reconvene after the commercials. Here we go. Morning, Alex. Looking lovely this morning. Am I? Thank you. Something has to fundamentally change in this country. I've shouted about this country for the last 20 years and no one is willing to tackle these monsters. Instead, they've doubled down on it. Somehow we have to address this by someone who has a vision, or I fear, civil war. Well, the vigilantism's only going to continue to grow, isn't it, if people feel that the mechanisms of state aren't providing anymore. It is absolutely clear that to vote for Labour or any other brand of communism, you have to be thick, gullible or a traitor. And in many cases, all three. You're welcome. Regards from Ed, who's in Hampshire. Merv in Wiltshire. I agree with you, absolutely. I have contacted you before. I'm under palliative care for cancer, so a lot of this won't affect me. However, I see people ignoring this disastrous government, slowly killing this country. Kids and grandchildren will be used to it, and of course, it will be educated into them. Good rant. I probably won't need to live with it, says Merv in Wiltshire. Merv, that's a really moving message. But you're right. It's what are we leaving to the next generation? And they were not brought up in a world of free speech. They were not brought up in a world of celebrating their country's heritage and tradition, of strong female leadership. Our great Queen and Margaret Thatcher. It was all go when I was knocking about as a baby. They've been brought up in a very sad world that hates itself, that is taught that colonialism is evil, that Britain needs to repent for its sins of the past, that white people are born with some sort of original sin, that low-level crime is perfectly acceptable and should be excused because it's probably not the perpetrator's fault. They have no idea how good it used to be. Good morning, Alex. I'm at the end of my tether with everything that is going on in the UK. Rushing legislation through to keep pubs open until 5 a.m. for the World Cup just about finished me. What about all the other important issues we are facing? We need a complete change of government now. And it needs to be reform. We have to give them a chance to get us back to being Great Britain. Every day just gets worse at the moment. People say we mustn't stand for all the nonsense, but what can we do? We're powerless. Something has to give. And someone else said, thank goodness for talk TV and radio showing us that we don't stand alone with our thoughts, like in the past. Wondering if anyone else felt the same or had similar ideas. Alex, I keep hearing people saying that this Burnham guy doesn't have a mandate to run the country. Has everyone forgotten that the Labour Party had a mandate and did the complete opposite to it, says Simon in Nottingham. Democracy, my darlings, is dead. Pretty much. Oh, well, it was nice while it lasted. Right, we're going to be taking a short break. If you want to get in touch with the programme and have some chit-chattery with us, we would love to hear from you. The number for communal catharsis is 0344499 1000. It's your normal network rate. Free therapy, because you're going to wait at least 2 years to have that on the NHS. So if I were you, I'd get calling. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd rather send a text message. If you're going to do that, you've got to write the word talk before you write out your message. We're going to be taking a short break. When we come back, the brilliant Nick Ellaby from Talk Sport is going to be coming to talk to us all about pubs staying open, and I'm sure we'll sprinkle in a little bit of the World Cup as well. That's after this.
crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Good old Sir Keir Starmer, ready to firefight a crisis every single time one pops up. Here he is, Sir Keir to the rescue, our knight in shining armour, because he has laid down emergency legislation so that pubs can stay open really late on Monday night for that England game, because, hey, we somehow managed to squeak through, didn't we? It was a bit of a sort of nail-biting game against the DRC, but we got there in the end. Thank you, Harry Kane. I don't know what we'd do without you. But now this is where stuff starts to get really serious. With some of the bigger names knocked out of the competition, everyone's going to want to see quite how far England can go. Nick Ellaby is with me. Pubs open until 5 a.m. on Monday. Now, I'm a lucky little beast because I've got a sort of photo-negative existence. I, of course, work Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So Sunday nights to me are like, whoop, whoop, who wants to go out and about? And the pubs are all shut. So I'm looking forward to this.
So will you be drinking tequila shots at 3 a.m. after England squeaked past Mexico in the Azteca?
I will be having local cider, probably. But
That's good. We need to be supporting our local pubs. Yeah. What's the name of your local?
If I say that, they're all going to turn up. They'll come and doxing me on air, Nick. I can't be doing that.
Apologise, I didn't realise.
If I say that, I'm going to get... I live in a Lib Dem area. The loons are going to come out and start chasing me out of town with pitchforks.
I didn't realise quite how popular you were.
Unpopular.
All right, well, let's keep that under wraps. A lot of the people at TalkSport will be around the corner in the Redwood because the England-Mexico kicks off at 1 a.m. On Monday morning. Probably finishes at 3, although there are thunderstorms forecast for Sunday into Monday in Mexico, and we've seen that a couple of times in this World Cup. When there's lightning, when there's thunderstorms, they have to cancel the game, postpone it. We haven't seen any games completely cancelled yet, thankfully, but it looks like this one is a real high risk, so we could see it going into 4 to 5 a.m. I mean, I don't know what happens if the game is pushed past 5 a.m, whether the pubs can stay open for that. But, as you say, an easy win for Sir Keir Starmer because the licensing laws were relaxed for this World Cup. For the 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. kickoffs, pubs were allowed to stay open till 1 a.m, and for those later kickoffs up to 10, they could stay open till 2. And it looked like the government were not going to move on this, but then Sir Keir said, look, I'm coming in. And what he said is football might be coming home, but we're making sure fans don't have to. Now, the big question for the fans is, do you stay up or do you try and get some early sleep?
Strategic power nap and then get up again.
Yeah, so what are you going to do?
Oh, I don't have to get up the next day at all, so I'll just stay up. I'll be, like, living my best life.
On the tequilas from 5 p.m. right through till 5 a.m.
Yeah, exactly. I reckon I've got the stamina for it. I can do it. I'm a Boudica. Metal of my pastures is not under question. But what about this idea that kids shouldn't have to go to school? I mean, I would understand if it's the World Cup final, OK? Yeah. If it's the World Cup final, given that we all bleat on about, 1966, whatever it was and all of that, and how we've not been able to lift a trophy for 1,000 years, not in most people's lifetimes, quite frankly. I can understand if we get to that stage, then the whole country will be glued to their screens. Isn't it a bit premature to be talking about, cancelling a bit of education and not turning up to the office for a shift because we've, just made it out of the group stages?
I think in terms of work, adults should be able to just suck it up, watch the game and either have that early sleep tactic or just power through and get through Monday. In terms of the kids, it's a parental choice, If your kids are well into the World Cups, Thomas Tuchel's already put out the statement after the game. He said, look, we need everyone behind us because this game in the Azteca is going to be really difficult for England. So
little Billy not going to school is going to help us score the goals?
Do you believe in the power of positive energy?
No.
No? Well.
Otherwise otherwise the world would be a much better place right now because I'm radiated.
Or it may not. But, you know, England versus Mexico in the Azteca is World Cup heritage. I mean, this is the stadium where Diego Maradona scored his famous Hand of God goal, and then the incredible slalom goal as well that we lost to Mexico in '86. There have been some huge games. Mexico is the most World Cup country. This is the 3rd World Cup it's hosted, more than any other nation.
The most World Cup country,
it really
the World
is.
Cuppiest of all the nations.
It's the World Cuppiest of all countries, and so I think, you know, it's up to the parents. But this, yes, it's only a quarter-final.
How are they as a side though? Because, you know, if you're going to stay up and have the old red eyes in the morning, you kind of want to be winning, don't you? If it's going to be a massacre on the pitch, you may as well just go to bed and wake up to the bad news.
Are you asking about Mexico or
Mexico,
England?
both, frankly.
Well, Mexico,
how are they sizing up?
Mexico are actually, I mean, they haven't lost a game, they haven't conceded a goal. They have this incredible record in the Azteca where they've played over 80 games and they've only lost 2 competitive matches. They haven't always played the top sides, but they have beaten Brazil in that run. And they have a very, very organised manager. And it's kind of a dichotomy. They're quite a defensive side, but the fans, they always want to see this attacking football, so they defend with their lives. But when they go forward, they're roared on by about 80,000 Mexicans in the Azteca, and so they're attacking. You know, they've been great as well.
Sometimes playing at home is an extra pressure, isn't it? Sometimes it's actually the thing that sort of makes people bottle it because they realise how significant it is.
I think what you're going to see is what Mexico likes to do is basically try and strangle teams in the Azteca because they're playing at altitude, they're not used to it. Mexico have been there for a longer time, so what you will see is Mexico will have a real good go at England in the first 15 minutes.
Got like high energy, lots of pace to get everyone panting a bit.
Exactly. It's really hard to catch your breath. It's really hard to get that second wind at altitude. But if England can hang in there for the first 15, 20 minutes, get to that first hydration break and it's 0-0 or even nick an early goal, then England are the better side.
Oh, really? You think so?
100%, yes. I mean, we're one of the 4 seeded teams for this World Cup. We are supposed to go to the semi-finals. But saying that, winning against Mexico in the Azteca would be one of the great England victories in my lifetime.
We haven't looked that tasty against the DRC and Ghana, though. Do you know what I mean? We had a good run against Croatia, but recently, yes, we've managed to get through, scrape through, but I don't think we've been looking particularly dynamic, exciting, or like a sort of World Cup winning side.
No, you're right. You don't need to be. You just need to win the games. I mean, we've had teams win World Cups before without being particularly convincing. For example, Spain in 2010, they had a lot of possession, but they kind of won every game 1-0. Argentina last time around, they lost to Saudi Arabia 2-1 in the first game in the group games. So it's not uncommon for teams to be unconvincing on their route to the final. It's just you've got to put it together at the right moments, and that's what Thomas Tuchel's hoping he'll be able to do with England on Sunday night.
How are you going to war game this? Because you just let on to me earlier before you came on air that your morning alarm is sort of horrific. It's basically that, you know, when everyone's going to bed, you're waking up to come and do TalkSport breakfast. Well,
I'm actually on Monday, I'm working a bit later. I'm working at 8:30, so I can actually watch the game, but I would employ the early sleep tactic and then get up. But actually, I want to watch Brazil versus Norway at 9 p.m. So I'm actually just going to, I think I'm going to sleep late Sunday morning and then just power through.
You sleep when you're dead.
Exactly,
Attack life, that's what I say. And you've lost a little bit of tiredness every now and then.
It'll be all right.
We do it when we go on holiday.
It's not a real job, is it?
No, we were saying that as well.
We're just gassing.
We just get paid to chat. It's brilliant. Exactly. I love it. Nick, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
It's wonderful having you in the studio. You're going to stay up and watch the game. What are your plans? 03444 99 1000. Let me know on WhatsApp. I actually want to know whether you're organising sort of a sleepover, perhaps, a pyjama party to watch England take on the might of Mexico in the Azteca Stadium. You can also send me a text message, 87222 for that. Write the word talk before you type out your text. We're going to be taking a short break, but don't go anywhere because I'm back just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, I hope you sleep well in your beds at the moment, despite it being a little bit clammy, a bit hot and sticky. I hope you're getting good rest. Don't let this keep you up, though. The fact that Russia are apparently planning an attack on Poland to test NATO's resolve. That is according to intelligence that has come out from the United States, and I don't think we should be at all surprised. Meanwhile, at the same time, we have learnt that there's at least a £5 billion funding shortfall just to cover the bare basics of our defence. The budget shortfall is probably more akin to 15 billion. And who do we have inside the country? What terrorists have we enabled to get access to HMOs, hotels, plotting where to strike critical infrastructure? And that is exactly what could be targeted, apparently, by missiles and drones, with soldiers potentially crossing the border from Kaliningrad or Belarus. Let's speak now to Rear Admiral Chris Parry, ex-NATO commander. Chris, always an honour to have you on the programme. Now, we've heard for a long time warnings about Russia, quite what Russia can do. We saw this horrific attack, actually, in Monaco against a Ukrainian oligarch over there. And we know that there are going to be sleeper cells connected to the Kremlin here in the United Kingdom. But do you actually think that Russia has it within the tank to do some sort of low-level attack on NATO? Do you think that it thinks that NATO really is so unresilient that it could get away with it?
Good morning, Alex. Yeah, the fact of life is Russia does have the capacity, the spare capacity and a capability to do this. I must say I'm a bit sceptical about these intelligence reports. They're very vague. It's almost like my friend's friend told me that this is going to happen. It's very non-specific. And it's the Poles themselves that are saying that we've got this intelligence from the United States. So I think it's very generalized. Right now, we know we're under attack in Europe by Russian agents. They use organized crime syndicates. They use all sorts of ne'er-do-wells to do their mischief for them. And they'll interfere with our infrastructure and also anything else they can. They're not very happy, Alex, that we're supporting Ukraine at the moment. And so what they're trying to do is disrupt not just the way we live, but also the public narrative as well.
I mean, are we right to continue to support Ukraine, therefore, if it increases the risk on our home soil?
Well, that's a political decision, to tell you the truth. And both the governments of recent years have made the decision that we are going to support Ukraine. My own view is that Ukraine has to be supported. It's a victim of aggression. It's had its borders penetrated. It tends to suggest that if Russia is successful in Ukraine, it will start probing somewhere else. And one of the worries I've got, to tell you the truth, Alex, is if you get a ceasefire or you get an agreement in Ukraine, Putin or whoever succeeds him, because I think he's probably coming to the end of his time, will start putting pressure on Sweden and Finland for daring to join NATO, and also the Baltic states as well. The Russians are uniquely seized. They have been for the last 150 years about anything that's happening in the Baltic and the Black Seas. That's why they got involved in Ukraine in the first place. So the Baltic is the next natural choice. What adds to my concerns about that is that if they do have some sort of ceasefire, and they are running out of steam at the moment, the Russians in Ukraine, they'll have 1 million men under arms, all dressed up with nowhere to go. And Putin will not want them coming back to Russia in those conditions.
Wow. I mean, we've actually seen a sort of coordination of troops along borders, as we did before the insurgency into Ukraine. But where are we standing in all of this as both Europe, as NATO, as the United Kingdom? Because Donald Trump has tried banging his fists on the table and saying, look, it's all very well coming with your begging bowl over to Washington, D.C. and saying, please, can you sort out Putin for us? What are you doing yourself? And we now see that Andy Burnham's going to come in, doesn't want to cut welfare to fund defence. We've got at least a £4.9 billion deficit for the very bare basics. At the same time, we're handing weapons over to Ukraine. We should be developing a military-industrial complex, could be using the recruitment of armed forces to plug some of these gaping employment gaps, particularly among young people. And yet the government doesn't seem to be grasping this or doing anything about it. How ill-equipped and ill-defended are we?
At the moment, Alex, everything you say is absolutely true. The effects of basically committing to Afghanistan and Iraq are living with us right now. Everything was benchmarked down, and despite all warnings from people like me that Russia was rising rapidly again and China was entering the scene, I'm afraid our grandees at the top of our armed forces and our politicians totally ignored it. And it's one of the disadvantages of living in a democracy is that everybody takes a look every 5 years when there's election. They don't think long-term strategic. Now, the big problem we've got at the moment is the defence investment plan can play with all the numbers it likes. As you say, there's a huge shortfall in terms of resources, but in fact, it's worse than that. The lead times for quite a lot of the things that they're claiming that they're going to resource are way out in the future. We're talking about beyond 2030 when people say we need to be ready for war against Russia. Some of the things won't come into play until the 2040s. So basically, these are post-dated checks. They're never, ever going to come into commission, any of these capabilities. And we need to be very realistic about what we need now. It's what I call, what are you going to fight with tonight? Fight tonight. That's what we need to be concentrating on, not some sort of wishy-washy strategy, which all these politicians know they're not going to have to deliver.
What do you make of Donald Trump's intervention yet again ahead of a big summit in Turkey of NATO, where he's going to again demand members spend 5% of GDP on defence by 2035, saying it'd be ridiculous for the United States to maintain its current level of support for NATO if everyone else doesn't also do their fair share, and suggesting that Europe might not have US backing in the event of a Russian invasion. I mean, should Europe reduce dependence on US military systems? Should they be looking to unite and coalesce around concepts such as PESCO, or does that directly undermine NATO?
We want to strengthen NATO, Alex, and that's to draw the United States in as an equal partner. Now, the United States is planning to spend $1.5 trillion dollars on defense, coming up in the year. We can't match that. But to get us in a fit state to deter Russia, and deterrence is a lot cheaper than having to defend, it would cost Europe about sort of $600 billion in a one-off. Okay, and that's why the Americans get skeptical. They say, well, actually, we're spending 2.5 times what you need to spend in a one-off in 1 year alone. So don't tell us you're spending enough on defense. But there's another point there, Alex, as well. Talking about percentages of GDP, frankly, are pointless. And I get tired of saying to people, look, concentrate on what capabilities are required and actually work out what they're going to cost. Percentage of GDP mean nothing if your economy is way down low, for example. If our economy collapses, 5% of GDP is less than what we have today.
Right.
So it's a ridiculous criteria. And I've been telling everybody from Nigel Farage through to Kemi Badenoch, stop talking about percentages of GDP. Tell us what we're going to defend ourselves with in terms of capabilities, work out the cost, and then work out the risk if you want to take it, if you're not going to pay for these things.
And where should those spending priorities lie? Because, we were looking at potentially changing to a next generation fleet, if that's the right word, of military jets, potentially autonomous, partially autonomous ones. And yet the defence investment plan, I mean, it's taken ages to get out. There's not really, to me, any clear indication of what the strategy is going to be. Where should we be focusing those resources?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Alex. I'm very sceptical again about, there's hardly a strategic approach to it. It's sticking plaster all the time. And we've got to get a strategic approach in place, both for our capabilities and our investment. And one thing we've got to get into our heads, the Russians are not going to invade Europe. They're going to smash us up with missiles, drones, and anything else they can. So the priorities for us, Alex, are nuclear. We've got to get our strategic deterrent on an even footing, because the one thing that can hurt Russia, remember, it's 10 time zones wide, is nuclear. And they really fear our nuclear capability because nobody's going to invade Russia. So they know that. They can sit behind it. Secondly, we've got to deal with hypersonic ballistic missiles and drones. The UK has no defence against those. We are the furthest country, apart from Ireland, from any land threat in Europe. And we need to say to ourselves, what will defend these islands and work out from that. So get your home defence sorted out first, what protects this population against attack. You either do it yourself or with allies, and then we talk about how we're going to support our European allies after that.
Chris, thank you ever so much for coming on the programme. It's always an honour. Rear Admiral Chris Parry there, who is, of course, an ex-NATO commander himself. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, blimmin' do you feel undefended? It concerns me. It really does, especially when you look at the granular detail of so much of the defence budget has to go towards things like pensions. And then, of course, we've got the sort of virus of lanyardism throughout our armed forces. But what we don't have is enough trained young men and women to actually fire the weapons that also need to be procured. What about the next generation of fighter jets for air combat? What about tackling grey zone warfare, part of which, of course, is the mass exodus of people from places like sub-Saharan Africa, aided and abetted by the Wagner mercenaries to flood our nations with wrong-uns and terrorists. What about protecting our critical infrastructure? There is a lot for us to have to tackle. That's without even getting into things like PSYOPs and cyber. What are your thoughts on all of this? 03444 999 1000 is the number to send a WhatsApp. 8722 if you'd rather send a text message. Write the word talk before you text. Now, we're going to be taking a short break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by one of this channel's absolute favourites, Austrians. He might be our only Austrian, which puts him in pole position. Professor Ralf Schumacher, Schulhammer turned him into a racing driver there, is going to be joining us to talk about the fact that Germany is going to be cracking down on sick notes and to ask him what he thinks about what is going on in the United Kingdom. That's coming up after this.
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back. Now, when you think of countries in Europe and sort of typecast them, OK, stereotype them, the one that you imagine is the most strict, the most earnest, the most headmasterly would be Germany, right? They don't take any nonsense over there, or do they? Because it seems to me that there's a bit of a lackadaisical approach to sickness leave in Germany. Not that dissimilar from what we face in the United Kingdom. They're bringing in new rules designed to boost the stagnating economy, requiring ill employees to get a doctor's note immediately. Let's speak to the wonderful Ralph Shawhammer all about this. Now, we've got a huge situation of a growing welfare bill, 1 million young people not in education, employment or training, countless people on sick leave here in the United Kingdom, and people who game the system on social media offering advice on how you can get a certain sick note or get certain PIP payments by simply answering questionnaires in a certain way. What is the situation going on in Germany? Why is Chancellor Merz having to address this head on?
Well, I think the problem is similar to what you just mentioned regarding the United Kingdom. But overall, I would argue this is the consequence of a thoroughly demoralized society. I mean, the same loopholes, I guess, that you have in the UK, you have in Germany. But it is always important to mention, at the end of the day, the state and the government allows for these things to happen, because otherwise they would just try to close up those loopholes. And we have created conditions where, let's call it immoral behavior, whatever you want to then ultimately name it, is rewarded, whereas moral behavior, getting up in the morning, going to work, paying your taxes, is actually very often, at least that's the feeling that many people have, is being punished. So more and more people consider to opt out of this system, which I can fully understand.
Where did the rot set in? Why is this becoming an issue across Europe, potentially across the Western world? Did it all sort of kick in during COVID, when everyone got used to sort of living on handouts and not really working, hanging out at home under blankets, the whole drive, the whole agenda for working from home? Is that where this sort of work shyness has emerged from? Or has there been something going on underneath it all? What do you consider to be the progenesis of this sort of economic stagnation, the lack of a work ethic, the lackadaisical approach to industry across Europe?
Well, I think that is partially the case, but there's also an ideological component. There's this weird obsession, particularly in continental Europe, that you can work less but earn more. Right? It's all these days, the 4-day work week, the 3-day work week, the 2-day work week. And then they publish all these studies and say, well, look at this. They did a study in Iceland showing that the 4-day work week is more productive than the 5-day work week. And then you look at, okay, what did they look at? Kind of who participated in the study? And I think in one case it was the public library of Reykjavik or something like that. Well, I'm not even sure how you measure the productivity of a library. I mean, try the same in a hospital. You know, you tell me, Alex, how exactly will a nurse or a police officer be more efficient at their job if they only patrol the streets or take care of the sick during 4 days of the week and not 5 days of the week? So there's a lot of, you know, voodoo economics and weird proposals how this is supposedly going to work. Yes, it's going to work in your little PR consultancy firm where you have the hammocks and the little table tennis thing at the foosball table. I'm sure that it works there, but they all going to be replaced by AI anyways. So those who think you can have the 3-day work week, they'd be surprised. They're going to have the 0-day work week.
Is there actually an agenda drive in this, Ralph? Because this is definitely, I'm of my own time in the European Parliament, and there's a lot of voodoo economics in that place. But you're right, the whole idea of people need a beanbag and a breakout space and campaigns to walk up the stairs to work and unisex toilets and trans flags and, you know, menstruation leave and all this rubbish, which basically gets in the way of growing the economy, does seem to find its nexus in the heart of Brussels.
Well, there is the late David Graeber wrote very eloquently about so-called bull jobs.
Oh, Ralph, you're going to get me into trouble because there are various apparatchiks listening to the programme waiting to pounce on me for bad language, even if it's not from my mouth.
That's the title of the book. So this is the title of the book on Amazon.
Okay.
So but fair enough. So the BS books. Let's call it.
There we go. We'll stick with that.
Let's call it this. What happened to Free Britain? So these kind of jobs, right? Is exactly what you say. It's the I don't know, the equality officer or the transgender flag replacer or whatever it is, and very often they make more money than, you know, people that I would say put in an honest day's work five times a week. And at some point they say, why am I doing this? And, you know, we can expand this to other areas. If you have the impression that not working just pays slightly less, than working full time, more and more people say, I'm not crazy, I'm not going to work full time. And if you can create the impression, if the government opens up the possibility that you can be counted as a disabled person, as a sick person, and you never have to work again, and this started under Tony Blair, if I remember correctly, of course people will take that option.
Do you think there's an actual agenda for this? People often talk about Davos and the WEF and their sort of programmes, their vision for the future, where, you know, everyone sort of has some sort of universal income and sits at home and robots do the cleaning and Lord knows what the average human being should be getting up to. Is there some sort of conspiracy theory behind this, a sort of rich seam of coordination across the Western world? Have these things sort of happened simply due to an increased buying in of indulgence when it comes to politics?
Well, I would argue that in order for it to be a conspiracy, it would have to be done clandestinely and in hiding. But a lot of this is happening completely out in the open. So I think you're correct. I would just say it's not necessarily a conspiracy, as all of this is being discussed quite openly. In many ways, this sounds very old-fashioned, I'm aware of it, but I think we have to return to, call it Victorian or 19th century virtues. Particularly, by the way, if you look at the dropout rate also of young men out of the labor force and out of the workforce, this idea that you cannot be, again, call me old-fashioned, but you cannot be a man, in my opinion, if you're out of a job, right? There should be, and this goes also to you, Alex, you know, as women. I think women should not date men who don't have a job. Maybe this is going to have an effect. But you know what I mean, right? This is just for your own self-worth, this idea to say, I don't work. I mean, this should always be a source of shame.
Right.
And, yeah.
No, you're right. The social stigma around it's completely disappeared. Yeah. Let me ask you your opinion of what's going on in the United Kingdom and the fact that without any sort of national ballot, 20,000 people in Makerfield have decided that we should change our Prime Minister. And so we've got Andy Burnham, who wants to move 10 Downing Street to Manchester. He wants to work on a 10-year programme to nationalise utilities, which will cost an arm and a leg, completely overhaul council tax, various other pretty left-wing propositions, and yet we haven't gone to the polls. Meanwhile, at the same time, what you're seeing, this whole sort of, you know, march towards the radical left, which seems to be happening across Europe. At the same time, the lawfare against the populists is ticking up. Very soon we're going to have the parliamentary report into Nigel Farage and the £5 million donation he was given ahead of becoming an MP in Clacton, which some people are dressing up as, you know, the usual sort of deep state establishment antics of lawfare, a la Donald Trump. We've got Marine Le Pen, who on the 7th of July will find out her fate in the courts and whether she can participate in a plebiscite. What is going on in Europe? And I want to get your outside analysis of specifically what is going on in the United Kingdom.
Well, I think in a nutshell, what you have happening is people want right-wing policies and they get ever more left-wing governments. And I think that is a condition that cannot go on forever. I think it's going to find its end very soon. Now, what I have to say about the UK, which it's always very remarkable for me, is that I listened to the interview you did before about defense spending in the UK, but at the end of the day, you can spend as much on defense if you want. The first line of defense is always domestically. And it is very hard, I think, for the British people. The same is true in Germany. We just recently had a case of a Swedish police officer being killed by African, football fans in Copenhagen. I think it happened yesterday or the day before yesterday. So if you feel unsafe at home, I don't think that you really care that much about defending yourself from a foreign country. And this is part of this whole demoralization. And I just think that Andy Burnham is not the kind of figure that will reinvigorate the British spirit, which I, by the way, think is still there. But I think that somebody like Nigel Farage or Rupert Lowe, I know there's a huge gap, which I think is a huge mistake. The British people are very clear about what they want, and that the parties and people that could deliver it have decided to
there's a weird pattern going on here. There's been going on for quite a long time. I mean, I dare say it goes all the way back to the financial crisis, where the powers that be, the system, decided to overthrow democratic leaders and replace them with their own apparatchiks. We saw it happen in places like Greece. Macron, to me, is very much an establishment stooge, whereas when the person rises up to the forefront because that is what the public wants, who is from the populist right, which seems to be the pattern across the West, the same playbook is rolled out, whether it's America, whether it's France, whether it's the Netherlands. What is going on here?
No, I think your assessment is correct, but there are two ways in which to change this. One is through elections, and if this is not going to work out, it is through revolutions.
Right. This is the problem. We're not getting elections, are we? Andy Burnham, in my mind, hasn't been elected enough to suddenly run the country. It was the same, frankly, when Macron called the snap elections in France the same time we had ours, and everyone ganged up to block out Rassemblement, who otherwise would have been the biggest fighting force. The same thing essentially happened to Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. The same thing in some respects is happening to Giorgia Meloni, who wanted to bring in a radical programme of change for Italy, and the deep state there seems to be shackling her and preventing her from doing so. Why won't they let us get our own way?
No, but that's the thing. If the state refuses to honor the wish of the population for change, at some point the people have the right to, again, I'm not proposing revolution, but you know what I mean. And the British have a long and rich history of telling the state, listen, if this is not going to work out the way that we want it, we have to do something about it. This is why you call it a glorious revolution. I think what was possible in 1688 should at some point also be possible in the 2020s.
Well, we definitely live in dramatic times, that is for sure. Ralph, it's always so good catching up with you, even when you directly cite naughty words. Right, so we're going to be taking a short break now. When we come back, we're going to be talking to Dr. Taj Hargey, who's an Islamic scholar, all about the Rochdale grooming gang leader. That's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. It is the final hour of the show. Strap yourselves in. We're going to pick up the pace a little bit and steam straight towards the finish line with all sorts of hard-hitting, far-reaching conversations and debate. And let's just grab this one by the horns, shall we? Because it's about time we had a conversation as a nation about what we're going to do about Islam in this country. And I say that not from a position of thinking that all Muslims are bad people or that Islam needs to be banished or we need to, bring back the Crusades, but through admitting that when you look at some of the big issues this country is facing, whether you're looking at terror attacks, whether you're looking at the atrocity of the grooming gang scandal, even to some degree cultural worklessness, people who are state beneficiaries rather than contributors. Do we need to look at different social mores that run in tandem with our own? A lack of integration, communities that self-govern and live by a completely different set of rules. Now, somebody who's lived and worked around the world, as I like to bore you to death with a lot of the time, I can tell you right now that there are clearly countries that are Islamic countries that function highly efficiently. You only have to look at the big emerging economies in the Gulf who have been relaxing a lot of their social rules, who have become a magnet now for expat Brits to show you that actually a multi-racial, multi-religious society can work. But then you can look at other nations, especially those that are war-torn, especially those that have been taken over by oppressive theocratic regimes, naming, for example, places such as Iran, such as Sudan, where you can see that there are elements of Islam that have an extremely destructive impact on everybody who have to suffer and live under them. And what do we have in the United Kingdom? Well, clearly some sort of smorgasbord, because we have a growing Muslim population, many Muslims in public life, whether that be in sports, in the media, in politics, who clearly are fully integrated and have adopted and share our values. But we, without doubt, have a rich seam of people in this country who hate the West, hate what we stand for, and certainly seem to adhere to ideologies and principles that are not just alien to us, but in many respects abhorrent. Well, let's have an open conversation with Dr. Taj Hargey, who is an Islamic scholar and director of the Oxford Institute for British Islam and Imam of the Oxford Islamic Congregation. Thank you so much for coming on the programme, Dr. Hargey. Let's first of all frame this through the Rochdale grooming gang leader, who Number 10 seems to want to deport but doesn't seem to be able to. And Pakistan, well, supposedly rightfully says, well, if he's a risk to child safeguarding in your country, he is to us as well. But when we look at the communities, particularly up in Rochdale, where we have found that entire clan-based families have partaken in some of the sickest crimes in this nation's history, what do we need to do to tackle this endemic problem, to stop these huge cleaving divisions in our society where people are basically pointing the finger at the religion of Islam?
Let me first say that Shabir Ahmed should either be re-detained or to be deported. There's no ifs and buts about it. Okay, this is a horrendous crime that needs to be punished, and he shouldn't be allowed to go free. Now, the issue about Muslim segregation and Muslim isolationism, living in silos and ghettos, is a long-standing problem, unfortunately. Most Muslims, sadly, are not fully integrated in the society. They want to take the benefits of the society without giving back anything towards this country. So I think this is our biggest problem, how to get Muslims to be fully integrated, fully adapted and adjusted to this society. And sadly, we have our leadership, whether amongst the clergy or in civil society or whatever, who's not talking enough about this. For example, right now, we have about 20 British MPs who are Muslims in Parliament. They have said absolutely nothing about Shabir Ahmed and this vile monster who's now free. Neither have the Muslim Association of Britain or the Muslim Council of Britain or Muslim Women's Network. None of them actually has made any comment whatsoever about this disgusting man, this pedophile. So this is already indicative of this of the notion that many Muslims are not fully integrated. If they were integrated, unlike myself, I consider myself a patriot, even though I've come here many, many years ago through the front door, by the way, and not through the back door. And so I'm part and parcel of the society. I'm proud to be British, and I will uphold British values, whether it's democracy, whether it's rule of law, or whatever. So I would say, listen, for example, England is playing now on Sunday night. Now, I will be rooting for them forever, so to speak. I'm fully British. And if, for example, I'm originally from South Africa, and South Africa comes to play in a test match here at Lord's or whatever, I'll be supporting Britain and not South Africa. Okay, I will pass the Norman Tebbit test, that I belong here. So this is the most important thing, how to get British Muslims to become part and parcel of the society and not apart from it. That's the conundrum.
Is there almost sort of different types of Islam? Because when I think about Christianity, yes, we've got Catholicism, Protestantism, but by and large it all marches in the same direction. Whereas in the vacuum where people representing the Muslim community are not, like you said, coming out and chastising what has gone on in places such as Rochdale. There is a deafening silence, and into that vacuum, a lot of people from the outside are picking apart your religion and saying, well, it says in the Quran you can do this to women. Well, it says in the Quran you can, you know, the Prophet married, you know, a young girl at the age of 9. Well, you know, we are filling up that space with our own theories, and it's not really working out very well for the public perception of Islam within some corners of the internet and some corners of the electorate. So are there essentially different types of Islam? Does it matter when we get immigration whether we are getting the nuclear scientist from Pakistan who might well have gone to a British university, or whether we're getting the goat-herds from eastern Afghanistan?
Yes, of course it does. But the point is, I respectfully have to point out something to you. The Quran doesn't say you have a right to beat women. That's a total mistranslation of chapter 4, verse 34. The Quran talking about the fact that if you have marital problems, you should separate from them and not bloody hell beat them. That's number one. Number two, the Quran doesn't say Muhammad could marry a 6-year-old girl. That comes from fabricated sources from the Hadith, the so-called sayings of Muhammad. So the Quran doesn't endorse this. So yes, there are two types of Quran, two types of Muslims. There are the Muslims who follow the Quran specifically like I do, and there are Muslims who don't follow the Quran, follow the clergy, follow the Sharia, follow the Hadith, all of these man-made, manufactured stuff. So these are the two major problems that we have in Islam today. The battle for the hearts and minds of Muslims. Are Muslims going to be much more integrated and part of the modern society, or are they going to revert to medieval despotism? This is the battle, the struggle that we have today in the Muslim world. Are Muslims willing to be liberal, progressive, and integrated wherever they find themselves, or are they going to be just mindless followers of the clergy who is trying to hark back to a utopia that never existed in the first place?
But this is the thing. I mean, where are we in the United Kingdom? Where are we? How do the scales balance? Because certainly when we had the sort of first wave of immigration...
Sadly, we have a situation if we have to take the Muslim community as a whole in the round. We have about 75-80% of them are orthodox fundamentalists and backward-looking people.
75 to 80%, you think?
Yeah, about 75 to 80%. Okay?
Yeah, these are the people who basically do not share Western values, who want Sharia law, who...
Yes, absolutely, okay? And they don't tell you the truth. If you ask them, you want Sharia law, they say, no, we don't want, but deep down, they've been brainwashed and programmed to accept it. So about 10% modern liberal progressive Muslims like myself who wish to be integrated and not be part of this this fundamentalism. And then there's another 10% who have left Islam. Totally, their name may be Ali, now they call him Al, or their name may be Muhammad, now they call Mo. And they've totally abandoned Islam, so they are not really part of the community any longer. But we have 70 to 80% that I have to deal with, these fundamentalists, fruitcakes and fanatics that I need to deal with. Before you deal with it, I would need to deal with it, because they are a danger not only to me, but also a danger to you.
So how do we... I mean, that is staggering, the fact that you think it is that many. I thought we said 75 to 80%. I was expecting you to say that was the proportion of peaceful, Western-loving, integrated Muslims.
I wish it would be this, Alex. It would be that ratio. I wish it was inverted. But no, sadly, it's not.
What can we do about this? Where do we begin with this? Because
this Shabir Ahmed case just proves my point. Where is the denunciation from rank and file Muslims, whether from the clergy, from politicians, from NGOs, from organizations? How come this deafening silence about that?
What can be done? I mean, look, you know, if I was empress for the day, I would say that mosques need to be monitored, and I don't think there should be any harm in suggesting that everything going on in mosques should be under CCTV.
Firstly, I've always mentioned this. For example, when I became a citizen of this country, I swore my allegiance to the late Queen. Now, that's not enough. We need to, when people become integrated or naturalized in this society, they have to swear an allegiance to be integrated into the society, to be adapted and adjusted to the society. If their culture is so bloody important, then they should go back to that culture. If they have now chosen to come live here, they need to ship up. and step in.
What sort of things could a government do as policy to start pushing back against radical Islamism, lack of integration, people running a concurrent culture that is completely at odds with our own? Are we talking about banning a non-stun slaughter, shutting down faith schools, monitoring mosques, penalising, punishing, arresting radical preachers? How can we try and steer the oil tanker around? Because there seems to be a growing...
the analogy of the oil tanker. All right. So we have three fundamental issues. We have I call it 3M problem. We have the mullahs. I'll explain. The mosque and the madrasas. The mullahs are the clergy. And most of the clergy, sadly, are not degree qualified. Who becomes a priest, an imam in Muslim society, on the whole, is a person who didn't do well enough at A level. Okay? The one who just scraped through. None of them actually got an A pass at A level. All the mullahs that we have around us. Okay, so when we have these relatively ignorant people becoming in charge of the community, leading the community, what do you expect? But the point is, these mullahs are they are like the one-eyed leading the blind. Okay, because the blind can't see it all. They see a little bit. The second point is the mosque that you talk about. So yes, the mosque, any Dick, Tom and Harry can go up to the pulpit and give a sermon. And they are not qualified, and they are not really patriots, and they don't feel belonging. In fact, they always give the narrative of them and us, meaning that them, you, Alex, and others are all going to hell, and us, meaning Muslims, are all going to heaven. And they perpetuate that scenario and that narrative. And then the madrasas, the children are then fed this poison, this toxic indoctrination, and they grow up believing that. And that's why I say 70 to 80% of Muslims are fundamentalists, are fanatics, are fruitcakes, and are fascists, actually, because they don't see the necessity to adjust and adapt to this society. I myself, for example, if Cape Town, where I'm from, is so bloody important to me, why did I come to Oxford? Why didn't I just go stay there? Okay, I realize, no, it's better for me here, more freedom for me here, and Britain is a wonderful country, except when we have these extreme weathers.
Do you think there is an attitude? Do you think there's an attitude under some of these people who have come into this country that they are essentially taking the proverbial? They know they can sit and have polygamous marriages, multiple children, barely lift a finger themselves, demand council housing, while they're looking at all of us kafir running around working for them. Do you think they have that attitude that we are the second-class citizens who should be affording their propagation?
Absolutely. And why are we so timid? For example, Sweden this week just passed laws banning cousin marriages. Why are we so lethargic and so timid and so pusillanimous? Britain is now the laughing stock, and most Muslims. That's why we have this 1,000 people on these dinghy boats coming to our country, because they know this is a soft touch, and they can know that they can implement their culture and civilization onto us, and no one will say anything. And for example, I went to my doctor's yesterday, and I was quite flabbergasted, and I'd go to blood testing machine, a pressure machine, and there were things in 10 languages. Why 10 languages? I mean, if you're coming to live in this society, you should learn English. There's no need for us to provide translations.
Do you think there's two parts to this? One of it is a weakness because of the Be Kind movement, the sort of, tolerant liberal left, even if it means being tolerant of the most abominable forms of intolerance. But also, do you think there's a sense of fear now? Because, I'm thinking back to the post-Southport demonstrations, where we saw video footage of young men coming out of mosques with weapons. I follow various Islamist accounts online because I think it's important to see what they're saying to one another, where there's this huge push now to set up summer training camps. Let's get fit. Let's learn how to shoot some weapons. You might need it. To me, that pretty much looks like a jihadist training camp up in the Lake District or wherever it may be. Do you think we're frightened because we've been infiltrated?
That comes from the them and us mentality. When you have a them and us mentality, you can kill the them, because they are not part of you. So we need to get rid of this them and us mentality. In Islam, for example, it says that not only Muslims are going to heaven. Chapter 2, verse 62 says Jews, Christians, Sabians, and others are also going to heaven, provided they do three things. What three things the Quran says takes you to heaven? Listen carefully. What it says, that you must believe there's only one deity. Call him Allah, Yahweh, Jehovah. It doesn't really matter. Number 2, there will come a day of reckoning. And number 3, while you're on planet Earth, you should do good and be altruistic altruistic. Now, that is the basis of Islam. That Islam is not being taught. What is being taught by the mullahs, madrasas, and the mosque is this, the divisive Islam, the supremacist Islam, this non-Quranic Islam that has no place, especially in the United Kingdom of the 21st century.
I'm going to ask you one final question, and it may well be hard for you to answer or to quantify, but I've read various intelligence reports out of America that they believe that organisations such as Al-Qaeda are reforming and that they plan to commit mass atrocities, coordinated terror plots across the Western world in capital cities, and that part of the illegal immigration is seeding terror cells into this nation. If all of a sudden the blue touch paper was lit like another 9/11 and we saw mass unrest on the streets with terror cells emerging out of the woodwork, out of their HMOs, their asylum hotels, kebab shops, Lord knows where, starting to attack civilians and civilian infrastructure, how many of the 75 to 80% radicals in this country do you think would join in?
Okay, well, that percentage, the 75%, are those who subscribe to a fundamentalist philosophy. I don't think all of them are violently prone. I would imagine out of that number, maybe a quarter of them would be willing to take up arms against their neighbors, against their fellow citizens. And that's very, very concerning. I mean, but unless we are... Okay, we can do all types of... things to stop them, but we're not tackling the root cause. What is the root cause? The root cause is this mentality, the theology. You know, Blair, I'm not a fan of Blair. Blair mentioned education, education, education. I would say the way to tackle Islamic extremism is theology, theology, theology. You need to cut the roots, the theological foundations of the nefarious, toxic philosophy that had, by the way, upon examination, very little to do with Islam, but more to do with mullahism, extremism, and fundamentalism that has nothing to do with authentic scripture.
Can I just say, before I let you go, Taj, I just want to read some messages because they're absolutely flooding in for you. Sam in Barnsley says, Mr. Taj, top man, he can be my neighbour. Alex, give that man a platform. Stu in Surrey, I like Dr. Hargay, he's a good, decent guy. The Muslim man you have on is a fascinating interview. What a good guy and a good Muslim Dr. Taj Hargay is. And if all Muslims in Britain were like him, Britain would be 1,000,000 times better. What a breath of fresh air it is listening to Taj talking about Islam. He is so right. Another one. Get him on again. I've been listening for ages and it's the first time I've been moved to text in. You are a wanted man for all the right reasons, and it's been a real privilege and a pleasure to have you on today. Let's continue this discussion at a later date because we have dropped a few truth bombs in the last 20 minutes and the audience have been loving it. Dr. Hargay, thank you ever so much. Wow. What a fascinating interview. A man who's telling it like it is. And, you know, I did a calculation there, right? I cannot believe, I mean, I can believe, actually, but to hear it said on air that 75 to 80% of Muslims in this country are more likely to be of the radical sect rather than the integrated pro-Western sect is terrifying. And if about 20% of those would be willing to take up arms, or 1/4 of those, 1/4 of 80% is 20% of Muslims. That's 1 in 5 Muslims. Do the maths yourself, how many Muslims there are in this country and quite how many people might be prepared to go into battle against us. It far outnumbers and dwarfs our armed forces and our police combined. I think we are basically on a pathway to doom. It is a ticking clock. They have been assembling. They've been flooding this country. They've been gathering their weapons. They've been brainwashing and radicalising and coordinating and plotting because they have the time. They've only got to get it right once. We have to be vigilant, be ready all the time. I don't think it's going to work out well, is it? On that jolly note, should we take a break? When I come back, let's do more of your messages and do your calls as well. I can't wait to speak to you guys about some of these amazing issues we've been talking about today. 03444991000 is the number to give me a dial. 8722 on the text message. Write the word talk before you text. You can leave me a voice note on WhatsApp on 03444991000 as well. We're back just after this.
Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Let's dust ourselves down after that whirlwind sandstorm of a fantastic interview just then with Dr. Taj Hargay. So many people messaging in about that. Let's take some calls now, though. Let's speak to Joe, who's in Hertfordshire. Good afternoon, Joe.
Good afternoon, Alex. Thanks for having me on. It's the first time I've actually ever done this. I was driving along and just felt the need to interact with the certain people that have been on this morning. One thing I will say is that I said to your colleague, my nan and granddad were in the Second World War. He was in the Navy, she was in ammunitions. We were brought up, I'm a Gen X, on all of the talk about what they did for Queen and country, the flag, da-da-da-da-da. So basically, for years now, people have been keeping, we can't say what we want to say anymore. And in the day when they were talking about Hitler and bringing us up on all the things that they did, it was accepted. Over the years, I come from the East End of London, by the way, West Ham, and basically everybody in my family worked in the docks, right? And they all voted Labour. When my granddad was in a wheelchair, I said, right, you've got to get down there and vote for Maggie Thatcher. She's the only one that's going to give us a bit of change. Everybody hated Maggie. Everybody said about this, that and the other, but she gave you the right to buy. She built the M25. She won the Falklands. And everything she said is coming true now. And basically, Keir Starmer is just being exchanged for another Keir Starmer.
Oh, I think it's even worse. He's being exchanged for something even more soft, even more clueless, even more just, symbolic of absolutely vacuous nothing politics.
Absolutely.
It's sort of that... It's like the adage, isn't it, Joe? And I forget exactly what the wording of it is, but tough times make hard men. Hard men then make the good times. The good times make soft men, and the soft men make the hard times. And we're in that cycle right now of just being weak, woke.
Yeah. Our country has taken about 10 decades back. I cannot believe that the strong country, brilliant country that we were is going to pot. I've got 2 children, I've got 2 grandchildren, and I'm so petrified for them. You can't go out on the streets, you can't walk alone at night. I'm a lady, I live in quite a rural place, but there are hotels around here with illegal immigrants in, especially the one in Epping. I'm down the road.
It's amazing what you say. How many women... There was a fascinating investigation by the Daily Mail about women's safety on public transport, and I kicked off this topic a few years ago. I remember when I brought it up on good old Crosstalk back in the day with Kevin O'Sullivan and talked about the street harassment from migrant men, and it went viral, it went everywhere, and I was crucified for being a racist. How terrible. She's scapegoating a community, saying it's all foreigners here being unfriendly to our women, because it is. And now we're actually having a conversation about that. And what is so striking was in the course of that investigation, when they interviewed women, how many women, rather than the women being protected, they're being forced to slowly change their lives. They're being forced to decide not to walk out on the street at night, to think about what they're wearing, to think about where they're going. I mean, how long is it before we all have to wear blimmin' burqas?
Look, absolutely, I'm not racist. Patriotism is not racism. And I tread on deadly water sometimes with a few people that I know, but I feel the need to say that women of England, we are Christian, well, the majority, white, British, Caucasian women are Christian. We have our values in this country. Why, when we go to other people's country, do we have to abide by their rules? They're much stricter. I mean, Andy Burnham is just, you know, he's more like a wolf dressed up in sheep's clothing. I mean, we've taken one step back. Everybody hated Starmer, but I really wanted to keep him in until we have a next election, because now we're going to take a complete U-turn. This guy's going to come in on a coronation. Nobody in the country has had a word to say about it.
Yeah.
We're all just wokely accepting it.
I know.
Why are we accepting it as a country?
It's madness, because he's nice, because it's Andy. He's lovely. His eyelashes. Oh, look at all the women who love him. They all secretly fancy him because he's like the hot PE teacher that they natter about at the school gate. For crying out loud. Where's democracy? Where is reality? Where's accountability? We're living in a real-time communist coup, and because the man looks like, you know, Mr. Smith on the school playing field, we're just like, yeah, that's nice. I mean, for God's sakes, crying out loud. Joe, it's been fantastic. Thank you for that being your maiden call. Let's make it the first of many, shall we? Let's now speak to Karen, who's in East Sussex. Hi there, Karen.
Hello, how are you?
I'm all right, my darling. Whereabouts are you in East Sussex?
Bexhill.
Oh, beautiful. I love it down there. My brother lives in Eastbourne, so I try and get down to the south coast as much as possible.
Except we've got all the boats coming over. You know, my 15-year-old said to me the other day, he said, Mum, with this Online Safety Act, he said, Starmer is policing the internet better than he's policing our borders. Yeah. And that is a 15-year-old boy. And just listening to your last caller, she, you know, she's expressing what many others, the streets of London have become like the Wild West. And as for this nerve centre, it should be making everyone nervous.
Oh, then they're moving the Manchester number 10. Number 10 of the North.
Number 10 of the North, yeah. It should be making everyone nervous because he's talking like the whole country is a fuse box and he's the electrician. But look at the contraption or the claptrap, whatever way you want to put it. It's sparkling, it's glitching, the lights are flickering, and there's smoke curling out the back. And every speech is another short circuit. The man's wired up to the mains, he's wet, and the question we've got to ask ourselves is, do we want that hand on the switch?
Well, we don't get a blimmin' choice. That is what's so crazy about all of this. We're not being given a choice. I think that the streets should be drowned with the noise of people demanding, chanting, marching, protesting, saying, election now, election now, election now, election now. We can't keep having these crazy, unaccountable transitions of power to people who wake up one morning, decide they want to run the country, and then decide they're going to run it from their back garden somewhere. I'm sorry, Mr. Burnham. Politics happens in the capital city in most countries on earth because that is where people in real time come together to discuss and tackle the big issues facing the country, whether these are administrators, civil servants, lobbyists, big businesses, the actual parliamentarians. You can't do everything by Zoom call under slang kits like some woke millennial loser with some sort of made-up acronym mental health condition. This is the real world. We are supposed to live in a democracy. And I just look around me and everyone's just going, yeah, it's nice. Oh, yeah, Andy Burnham's going to be our next Prime Minister. Cool. What? Oh, Karen, thank you ever so much. Fantastic calls, both of those, Joe and Karen. What wonderful women they were. OK, we are going to be taking a short break and talking about a less than wonderful woman after it. Oh, isn't it funny? You can always... I said earlier on, didn't I, that if the left-wing beatify someone or something, give it a minute and they're going to have a mighty fall from grace. They always know how to pick a wrong 'un. And when it came to the simping, sycophantic celebration of Sturgeon, oh, Miss Sturgeon, what should Boris Johnson do about COVID? Oh, look at Nicola Sturgeon. She should be our next Prime Minister. Isn't she wonderful? No. She wasn't. She never was. And her husband's a crook in prison. And so she apparently has been putting her troubles to one side and getting to the bottom of a bottle lately. We're going to be catching up with Michael Blackley, Scottish political editor of the Daily Mail. All about it just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Was that just me hearing me at the end of that? You should be ashamed of yourselves. I think that was my voice. That was kind of weird. Right, OK, talking about you should be ashamed of yourself, Ms Sturgeon. Huh? Look at your legacy. Look at what you left in Scotland. You got booted out for being obsessed with putting women with willies into jails, for crying out loud. Then it turns out your husband is now having to start a 5-year stretch in HMP Dumfries for basically being corrupt and nicking all the money from the party. And yet, apparently, despite him embezzling more than £400,000, having all these weird things like posh pens, camper vans, no, Sturgeon didn't notice any of it. Nah, she just slept through the lot of it. Why would she know what her husband was up to, after all? Let's speak to Michael Blackley, Scottish political editor of the Daily Mail. Well, she's been seen out and about, hasn't she? Not in her natural habitat. Instead, dining al fresco in West London just days after her husband was jailed for embezzlement.
Well, I suppose there's a bit of irony as well that one of the first things that she did was to move to London. You know, here's this Scottish nationalist who's campaigned for independence all her life, and the first thing that she does when she leaves politics, while she's still facing quite a lot of questions about her conduct, is to move to London. And she certainly seemed, from the pictures that we used in the paper today, she certainly seemed to be enjoying herself yesterday over a long lunch in the sunshine.
I mean, for a lot of people like this, funny, isn't it? She was utterly beatified, particularly by the BBC. You could tell half the people up at Broadcasting House really wanted her to be the Prime Minister. They loved her. Everything she said and did during COVID, it was like, you know, the goddess Nicola speaks again. Why isn't everyone doing as she thinks should be done? And I find it quite difficult to believe that you can be in a marriage with somebody and not suddenly notice all of the trinkets and the gifts and the motorhomes that have suddenly been, you know, popping up all over the place when you're the party leader as well and your husband's the treasurer. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to sort of, you know, put Nicola Sturgeon on trial unjustly here, but there's something about it which isn't sitting right with me.
There's been serious questions that she faces. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And there was a bit of frustration during the police interview that she did, a bit of frustration from detectives that when she was questioned about all of this, she gave a no-comment interview. She has since gone on TV and said that she followed up with by providing a full written statement to police. And there has been calls for her to publish that written statement in the public interest now, so that people can actually see exactly what she told police. And she hasn't done that. So I think, I mean, yes, she is a figure that has now left politics. She might think that she can now escape some of these questions, but she is a big figure in public life, and there are so many outstanding questions that she really needs to answer. And I think the one that people find most remarkable is the fact that she went into her mother-in-law's house on a few occasions while the camper van was parked there and failed to see it, apparently.
Well, you know, maybe it's such an expensive, magical camper van, it's got disappearing powers. But this is the thing. People will look at the way the media have handled this, right? Where, other than your good self, there's nobody really from the legacy media asking questions or probing into Nicola Sturgeon's own role in all of this. It's barely being covered. And yet, you know, if Nigel Farage has a number of homes, well, that's on the front page of every paper, and the BBC are tripping over themselves to chastise him. Do you think there's this sort of strange two-tier system where, because she's a left-wing female politician, it's a bit hands-off, that she's essentially getting away with it because of that?
Well, I need to launch a robust defence of the Scottish media on that front. I mean, there is no question that Nicola Sturgeon has faced scrutiny from the Scottish media, and there has been a lot of questions still for the SNP. I mean, the SNP are trying to be pushed into backing a public inquiry, and it seems quite astonishing that John Swinney, as the First Minister, is currently getting away with trying to shut down any sort of inquiry into this, whether it be by the Scottish Parliament or by the House of Commons. I mean, only this week there's been the Scottish Affairs Committee have at Westminster has asked the Scottish Parliament to launch a joint work on this, to have an inquiry on some of the outstanding questions facing the SNP and perhaps even Nicola Sturgeon. And the SNP are trying to shut that down. So there's plenty of scrutiny and over the SNP's actions in this, and I would say there's plenty of scrutiny over Nicola Sturgeon. I mean, yes, she perhaps got away with some things during COVID in terms of the way that she presented herself, but she did also face robust questioning from elements of the Scottish media during the COVID pandemic.
Michael, thank you ever so much for joining us today. Michael Blackley there, Scottish political editor of the Daily Mail. All right, let's do a few messages, shall we? Then we're going to take a break, and then I'm joined by my little protégé, the gorgeous, wonderful Ellie Hodges, who's going to be talking to us all about social media. But let's do some of these. Alex, our military is in a mess. The army have already sent all their equipment to Ukraine. And deploying our troops into Poland is just Labour, who, despite having the patriotic British people who make up most of the military trying to look strong, and at the end of the day, Labour couldn't care less about the military or anyone in it. Steve from Bermondsey says, hey, Alex, looking good, girl. Thank you. I'm 59 and I grew up in London, and I lived through the Brixton riots, Broadwater Farm riots, poll tax riots, and many other demonstrations, and I still felt safe then. The police have no control and seem afraid to enforce the law on various ethnic groups, thanks to our government and London Mayor, who drives around in an armoured Range Rover but tells us Londoners that it's a safe place to be. Boris used to ride his bike everywhere. That's true. 15-minute city Khan should be made to zip about the place on a Lime bike with no protection while trying to, conduct his business on a mobile phone and see how long it is before he gets mugged. Nobody hates Sadiq Khan more than me. Hold my beer, Terence. But these grooming gangs didn't start just 16 years ago. Johnson and Livingston must have been aware, as was central government. What about our Prime Minister in waiting? The Greater Manchester Mayor. Lots of things were knocking about up there, weren't they? In his particular constituency, what did he know? What has he been part of covering up? Why aren't those questions being asked? We all know why. Two-tier blooming media. Right, let's take a short break. Now, if you want to continue sending a few messages or maybe squeeze in a final call before I shut up shop for the day and hand the throne over to the brilliant Ian Collins, the number is 03444 99 1000, normal network rate. And there may be enough time to squeeze in a couple more messages. So if you want to send a WhatsApp, 03444 99 1000 and text 87222, write the word talk before you write your text. Back after this.
Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in Crisis. Subscribe to The Royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Here we go. The latest ridiculous position from the Labour Party. Lisa Nandy, the Culture Secretary, has announced that the entire department is going to be leaving X because the Elon Musk-owned platform favours abuse and misinformation. At the same time, my eyes are literally looking at the BBC headline screen, where it turns out that child sex abuse ads have been found on Instagram. Oh, you doing anything about that, are you? Leaving that one? No. What about all the people traffickers who advertise their wares on platforms such as TikTok? You leaving that one? No. Even though it's like Chinese spyware conducting a mass industrial-scale psyop on the West. That's fine, though, isn't it? What about Snapchat? Is that a worry to you? Despite the fact that girls are being groomed on there and kids are sending naked photos to one another, essentially becoming paedophiles while they're still minors themselves? No, let's not worry about that. Let's only worry about X because there's freedom of speech. That's what this is all about. And look, I get it, Ms. Nandy, because in recent weeks and months I have been on the receiving end of some pretty horrible, vile, horrific abuse. And not actually from the FBPE follow back pro-Brexit, pro-Europe, whatever it is, you know, mad leftists. They've been bad enough. But from actual people on the right wing. You know, all these mentalists who want ethno-nationalism. I've had it in the neck a lot from them in recent days, and it don't feel nice, and it don't feel good. And yes, sometimes this thick skin has been penetrated by a dart or two, but free speech is important. So let's not pretend that this constant effort to single out and go after X, oh, look, you can put kids in bikinis on Grok, we have to shut down X. Don't you pretend to me that this has anything to do with safeguarding or democracy or any... If you're worried about the infiltration of hostile states into democracy, you better take a closer look at TikTok. Well, you don't do that, do you? No, because you love the Chinese in your party. Give them a mega embassy, let them buy half our infrastructure. Gazillions of state visits over there to set up Lord knows what, so Blimmin' Ed Miliband can carry on playing ukuleles in ever-growing solar panel fields. We know what this is about. But I will give you this. There are issues with all social media. But instead of tackling those issues, what you're doing is you just want to ban under 16s from access to them, which means all of us, doesn't it, have to hand over some form of ID to prove we are who we say we are and we are the age that we state that we are. So this is just an opportunity to close down right-wingery and become a surveillance state, isn't it? That's what's going on here. Can't fool us. All right, Ellie, how you doing? The lovely Ellie Hodges. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is my protégé.
Of course.
Yeah. So, what do you make of all of this? The idea that, you know, the problem with social media is just all about X. X is the problem. It's Elon Musk. He's a monster. He's trying to dictate what goes into the on in this country and corrupt our politics, and therefore, I'm going to make a stand. The department's going to leave the platform.
I think I completely understand why she's actually leaving, to be honest, because like both of us have probably faced quite a lot of abuse from X. It's not like an amazing place to be on, but the problem is it is the only platform I'd say that is absolutely free speech, and so many stories that we've all heard and it's been reported on have come from X, and we wouldn't know about so many of the main issues in this country if it wasn't for X. And I think it's still around 39% of UK adults use X every day, so it's one of the biggest platforms that people are using. And also, she's culture secretary. That social media and media comes under that as well, so she should be wanting to promote herself on there. But my big thing that I think is such a big issue now is that you have this blue sky thing being set up. So all of the left-wingers are kind of going there, and all of the right-wingers are still on X.
Oh, yeah, when you look at some of the mad things they say on places like Blue Sky, it's absolutely shocking.
Exactly.
But do you think that, you know, there's this singling out every single time of X, isn't there?
Yes.
And you're right, you know, the abuse on there has got out of control lately. My advice on that is, you know, put up a post. You don't have to sit and read through all the comments. That is just a simple way of shielding yourself from the worst of it. But you know, we are learning that, you know, you've got people peddling drugs on platforms such as Instagram. We now know that there are people peddling child abuse. We also know that various platforms, I mean, I read an article the other day that Vinted is being used to potentially sell little kids. Selling actual little kids. And, you know, rather than deal with these, this is real-life crime that could easily be prosecuted. She's just taking her department off the platform. She'd be far better off leaving it on there, flying over to America, sitting down with Elon Musk or the execs of X and saying, these are our concerns about what we're facing in Britain.
I think that's the problem, and it's very clear that she's trying to brand this as a personal decision, and because she can't take the abuse or whatever it is. But actually, it's just a political decision to say, I don't like Elon Musk, I don't like this kind of stuff that's happening on X. And I bet, you know, she's staying on Instagram, she's staying on Blue Sky, she's staying on TikTok, all of these other platforms where so many awful things are happening. Like you said, with Vinted, I mean, that's awful. Right. But all of this kind of stuff is happening across all social media platforms. It's not just X.
Exactly. You know, they're going after hurty words on X because it's right-wing, because, like you said, certain stories and narratives have emerged that would have been buried were it not for the transparency of X and the freedom of speech. But, of course, the flip side to that is if you allow people to say what they want when they want, some of the things aren't going to be nice. But when it comes to real-world crime, surely we need to be looking first at things like Instagram, Snapchat. These are the platforms that young people especially are being exposed to people trying to push cannabis gummies or self-harm videos, or encouraging people they've got gender dysphoria and need to get breast binders and top surgeries. You know, to me, that is far more egregious and dangerous and leads to a public health crisis before unpleasant comments.
Yeah, exactly. And the point that she made in her post was that because it spreads too much misinformation. I mean, every single platform does that, because not everything you see is always going to be correct, which is why when you look at stuff, you need to go and do your own research afterwards. And I'm sure that she knows that out of all people. So I think it's ridiculous that she is just targeting X in this. But I do think that it's fair to say that X is definitely not the most amazing platform, and it is quite toxic at the moment.
There are big issues with it right now, and I've noticed that. And look, you know, I'm fairly certain that X is one of the most vulnerable to being flooded by foreign bot farms in order to create division, in order to amplify certain elements of our politics, to further seed those, you know, those caustic relationships within our society. And X has become extremely vulnerable to that.
I think the problem is, as well, is that the polarisation of politics, because you now have, whether you like it or not, all of the right-wingers on X and all of the left-wingers on Blue Sky, you're not actually having that conversation. I mean, I never really get left-wing comments anymore on my posts. It's all just people that are further right than me or less right-wing than me. It's never really left-wing people anymore because they've all gone to Blue Sky. But it means that those debates aren't actually being had because they're just on two separate platforms.
Everything is siloed, and even on X, you know, the algorithms force people into silos. So what is the solution to all of this? I mean, look, when it comes to generational differences into how... I mean, I wasn't brought up with social media, which is amazing. I remember the good old days, and I would actually wish it on everyone to be able to go back there. But hey-ho, this stuff's been invented now. The good old days when actually you just, you know, phoned up a landline number and arranged a place to meet and hung out with your mates in real time.
This is why I'm actually anti-social media ban, even though I don't think that kids should be going up with social media, because when I was younger, my parents were quite strict on social media and didn't want me going on it, but I always found ways around it, and I always found a way to go on something. For example, if they took away my phone, I'd use the school laptop or I'd use an iPad, because there's always ways around things. And younger people, because they have grown up with social media, they're always 5 steps ahead of their parents or schools or whatever it is. That's why I think the social media ban will not work, because people always find ways around things. And people that do say that the social media ban is the answer, I think it's actually going to get worse, because what will happen is you'll have, I think it's 10 social media apps that are being banned, but what will happen is you'll just have more apps being made that aren't social media, but they are. And kids will all go on there, and they'll be even more unregulated than they already are. So things will get so much worse. You just have to, I think, start a culture where social media isn't embedded in every single part of your life growing up.
I mean, is this about, you know, essentially looking at social media and its effect on young people's minds as a potential public health crisis? Because, like I said, I didn't grow up with it. But, you know, at a young age, you must have been bombarded with highly sexualised images, with this sort of brainwashing about the trans cult, with extreme forms of bullying, because people say things online that they wouldn't say directly in person.
Yeah, it causes so many more issues than it actually helps anything. And also because now in schools and universities everywhere, really, social media is embedded into the culture there. You know, at school, even using different apps, using YouTube or whatever it is to learn stuff, for example. So everyone's on it. And also there's this sense of, if you don't have social media, it's kind of embarrassing, because it's the in thing to have and everyone's on it. I remember when I first went to secondary school, it's like everyone had Snapchat, and if you didn't have it, you were like really weird.
People saying weird things,
you know,
like,
and that's awful.
I've heard
because
some dark things about Snapchat. Is it as bad as all that? That, like, you know, people are sending each other nudes and...
Yes, I remember all of the stories, all the assemblies that we had to have about how we need to be careful on Snapchat. I mean, I was quite late to having it, but a lot of people had it from the age of like 10, 11.
And they're sending each other naked photos from that age, do you reckon?
Maybe some people would be, but I think it's because it's you send a photo and it disappears as soon as they open it.
I mean, that to me is so dangerous.
So
that is
bad.
groomers' paradise.
And that's why people, as well, with the bullying, are kind of more comfortable saying things, because it deletes after, like, as soon as you send it. And also, if you take a screenshot, it tells them that you took a screenshot as well. So lots of things can happen because people aren't afraid of doing it, because they know that either no one will ever see that they've said that or sent something, and there's no safety barriers on there at all.
Do you think that the problem is the government focuses unduly on freedom of speech rather than actual fighting crime online, you know, like the people trafficking?
Yeah, 100%, because